And just in terms of apologies, we have an apology received from Sydney Anderson. I don't know whether there's any other. Sorry, and Megan Fearn as well. Agenda item number 2, draft minutes. The minutes of the meeting held are at page 5. So if members are content with the accuracy and detail of the minutes. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Chairperson's business then. That's agenda item number 3. Visit to Energia. Or Energia, is it that the way they pronounce it?
Yeah.
To inform members that there's a visit has been arranged for myself to visit Energia on Tuesday the 5th of August at 11 o'clock. If members are content to make this a committee visit, and if members agree that anyone wishing to attend can come along if they so wish.
Where's Potsy?
Okay. It's in Newfords again, I think, in Belfast here. Is there headquarters? No. Anybody wishing to attend, just if they want to come.
When is that territorial?
The 5th of August. Tuesday the 5th of August.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. Right. Next item, Specialist Advisor to the Committee on Economic Policy. Dr. Leslie Budd has accepted the position of Specialist Advisor on Economic Policy to the committee. We're glad to hear. So, if members are content that Jim here liaises with Dr. Budd in the first instance.
Ready?
That's great, thank you. Next item is the oral briefing from the print industry in Northern Ireland. And papers for this item are at page 12. And included in that are witness biographies, page 13. Copy of the presentation, page 16. And briefing the committee today are Mr. Dominic Fitzpatrick, I think. Mr. Dominic Fitzpatrick, I just don't see him there, but no. Osnowell, is it? Dominic Fitzpatrick, Sarah Little, Jean Long, that's Dominic Fitzpatrick, MD of Irish News. Oh, there he's there. Miss Sarah Little, Commercial Director of Independent News and Media Limited, Miss Jean Long, Managing Director, Johnston Press, and Mrs. Jackie Ventum, Director of Training at Byrne Partnership. You're all very welcome indeed. Thank you for coming along to meet with us here today. As you know, we work within certain time constraints, and normally it's up to 10 minutes for the presentation that you make, and then there's a Q&A session for that. But I have received a request that maybe a wee bit of flexibility be allowed, so we'll be timing you up to 15 minutes then. And then after that, the procedure is that we have a Q&A from members. So I'm sure you have divvied up who's going to speak first, and if anyone else is speaking second, but just please keep you right on the time anyway. So it's I don't know who's fronting on this.
Yeah, I'm Jackie from the Byrne Partnership.
Okay.
The 3 publishers here are clients of ours, and each of them will speak briefly, as you've been quite clear. Jean is going to start, then Dominic, and then Sarah, and then I'll summarise just with the state of the industry in Northern Ireland at the moment.
Okay, please continue.
Okay, Jean Long, I'm Managing Director for Johnston Press, Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, we have a strong regional presence. We operate out of 9 offices spread throughout the province. We employ over 220 full-time employees. Further to that, we provide a key source of income for a significant number of freelance journalists, photographers, columnists and contributors. So along with the other papers here, we contribute significantly to the private sector and the Northern Ireland economy. We print all our titles, all our own titles and others in Portadown. We have 2 press lines, one of which prints the Guardian newspaper for the island. Our portfolio consists of 24 titles spread across the province, 1 daily newspaper in the newsletter, 21 weekly newspapers, 2 of which are free. 21% of adults in Northern Ireland read a Johnston Press newspaper each week. We have 18 aligned websites with strongly local audiences at 79%. The demographics of which complement our newspapers, and together they deliver an impressive total new and growing audience. We have a unique market combination in the London Derry area, where we have got 2 of the oldest newspapers in Northern Ireland in the Dairy Journal and the London Dairy Sentinel, both pointing to their own sections of the community, and they are the voice of those communities. The newsletter, of course, was first printed in 1737. It has a long and enduring history. It is the oldest continuously published newspaper in the English-speaking world with province-wide distribution. Its strength lies in the rural community. It's got a strongly unionist readership and predominantly rural with 72% of the readership outside Belfast. We publish Farming Life on a Saturday. It is the market leader among farmers with increased cross-community readership on that day. Indeed, we host annual awards for the farming community, which have been addressed by the First Minister, the DFP Minister, and of course DARD. The newsletter, iPad and mobile app was launched in January 2013. The core subject streams are news, business, sports, politics, opinion and debate, farming life, of course, cultural, arts and heritage. And of course the full paper is online, so those who wish to purchase it in that way can. We have a unique channel of the app, the Ulster Saturday Night, which is a comprehensive roundup of the day's sport, and it is available from 8 p.m. on a Saturday. We have then a raft of weeklies, and I'm sure many of you are aware. I mentioned the Dairy Journal, the London Dairy Sentinel. We, of course, are visible in Antrim and Coleraine, Ballymoney, Larne, Newton Abbey, Carrick, Belfast, Mid-Ulster Mail, which operates in Cookstown and Magherafelt, the Ulster Star, Lurgan Mail, Portadown Times, and so on. Really, in summary, we feel as an organisation a strong, sustainable local press is in the best interests of democracy, accountability and equality in a devolved Northern Ireland. We are the first to highlight and publish the work of local government and council issues. We have local trusted brands, and these are more relevant in the digital age of information overload. More and more consumers are demanding a diet of news as it happens, and our journalists work hard to be the first to report on breaking stories, delivering them via websites, mobile phone sites and our print publications. The investment to do this is enormous, but we're committed to that. Local media remain the best way to communicate information to local communities, and an important element which strengthens the private sector in Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my name is Dominic Fitzpatrick. I'm Managing Director of the Irish News, and I want to briefly just tell you a little bit about the Irish News and our sister companies, and I suppose the impact we have economically and also on the social fabric of society. I suppose I just want to start by saying we believe Northern Ireland is probably the most competitive newspaper marketplace in the world, and I suppose to be successful here you really have to be at the top of your game. Irish News history goes back to 1865. We're independently and locally owned, and we've gone through a lot of changes over the last 150 years. We have 40,000 daily sales and 155,000 daily readers. We're now the biggest selling of the local papers. We have an award-winning team of journalists, and we invest very heavily in local news and sport. We also cover a range of specialist areas such as health, education, the arts and so on. I suppose in relevance to where I'm sitting today, we also extensively cover business. We have a fully staffed business desk, and the business coverage is the sort of material Invest NI would use to promote corporate Northern Ireland. This year we were named the UK Regional Newspaper of the Year, something we're very proud of. We were also the best performing regional newspaper in the UK and Ireland last year. I suppose as well as covering a whole range of editorial activities within the paper, the Irish News is genuinely embedded in the community through a whole range of activities. While we cover sports, for instance, we also give back in terms of promoting and contributing to them. We have our All-Star event, which is a major event in the sporting calendar, our Club and Volunteer Awards, which recognise those in the community working in the background of their clubs. Again, while we cover the arts, we also contribute and donate to them. We were a founder donor of the Lark Theatre, for example. We donate and fundraise for charities such as Children and Crossfire and so on. And we have major business events, and it's appropriate again tonight we're holding our major business event, our Work and Employment Awards in the Titanic Centre. It'll be attended by about 500 people from businesses large and small across Northern Ireland, and it's represented by local and international companies, and in many cases it does showcase the best of NI plc. Jean's already mentioned digital is a very important challenge to newspapers going forward, and there are different varying opinions as to the best strategy for newspapers to be successful in the digital world. Increasingly, people do believe it's right to charge for content, and we certainly take that view. Our sister company, Interpress, is a state-of-the-art printing facility that we started from scratch 9 years ago, and we print a whole range of national and local titles. Some of them are our own. Farm Week, for instance, is one of our papers. It's the only standalone publication that covers the farming and equestrian world. And we also publish a range of newspapers for other publishers that many of you will be familiar with. This year, Interpress was named UK Printer of the Year. Again, a huge testament to the staff who work there, and something we're very proud of. I suppose in conclusion, I believe Northern Ireland has a vibrant, professional and highly performing newspaper marketplace. I also believe that newspapers are the most reliable and effective way of communicating with the population. I suppose if you can imagine as individuals in your constituencies or even as a government collectively trying to get your message of local government out without the daily and the weekly papers, how difficult that would be. Evidence shows that when newspapers fail, they are not replaced and vital sources of information die forever. Northern Ireland has a newspaper industry I believe we should all be very proud of, and I'm delighted to have the chance to come and speak here today. Thank you.
Sarah?
Okay, thanks. I'm Sarah Little, Commercial Director at Independent News and Media. Independent News and Media Limited Belfast is the Northern Ireland division of Independent News and Media plc. We have 2 print sites in Belfast and Newry, printing 6 national titles, amongst them The Times, The Star, The Sun and The Daily Mirror. We have a wholesale newspaper distribution company, and we also publish the Belfast Telegraph and the Sunday Life. We've created and developed and invested in a very strong digital side to our business that fully complements our print products in belfasttelegraph.co.uk, Property News and nijobfinder.co.uk, to name but a few. We employ over 350 people in Northern Ireland and have been making a positive contribution to the economy for over 140 years. The Belfast Telegraph is Northern Ireland's daily newspaper. Our first edition was printed on the 1st of September 1870. It's published Monday through Saturday and has a weekly reach in print and online of 470,000 people, and its readership reflects the demographic makeup of Northern Ireland, and by that I mean the geography, the religion and the social classes. With huge changes taking place across the newspaper industry, the Belfast Telegraph has invested in and successfully transformed its business from a traditional newspaper into a multi-platform publisher, and we now reach a bigger audience than ever before. The ability to access news in print on a desktop, iPad or iPhone is very important to us, but regardless of whether our articles are read on screen or in paper, we're committed to delivering trusted, impartial information and critique. Our print product, our websites and our apps deliver quality journalism with content at the very heart of everything we do. We deliver a forward-thinking, aspirational news service with the highest journalistic and production values. We're a paper that is serious but also encourages humour and is a big supporter of the arts and cultural life. We're a paper where lifestyle and human interest have a place alongside politics and business, and we also provide a high level of engagement through our letters page, through Debate NI and also through our websites. We don't just report the news. By campaigning for improvements in our quality of life, we sometimes try to affect the news. Huge litter clean-up programmes, unsung hero awards and organ donor awareness help to add to a sense of social cohesion. This is evidenced daily through the pages of our paper, but some recent activities to showcase this include The Young, where in April 8 students spent a week as part of the editorial team. We commissioned research on what the young think about life, education and politics in Northern Ireland. Students then voiced their opinions in paper, online, appeared on radio, even interviewed our First and Deputy First Ministers, and then finally edited the paper that Friday. The Giro, when we turned the paper pink to mark the launch of La Grande Partenza. Our apprenticeship scheme, where we created 50 jobs in 50 days, supporting Dell's Apprenticeship Northern Ireland programme. And our annual awards, Sports, Business, Women of the Year and the Spirit of Northern Ireland, where we celebrate excellence within the commercial community and the community sectors, increasing awareness of local achievements and rewarding individuals through recognising their achievements. The Belfast Telegraph, its commitment to reporting without fear or favour, adds to the democratic health of the country. Newspapers help add a plurality of voices to the debate, ensuring there's no dominance of outlet nor opinion. Each of the 3 local titles has its own distinct and focused role to play in reflecting the lives, interests and the values of the people of Northern Ireland. We will continue to expand our audiences and our revenues through new media, deliver quality journalism and evolve to meet the needs of a changing Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
My organisation, the Byrne Partnership, are commercial specialists in media management, both in the UK, Ireland and across the world. And I would like to summarise by demonstrating how the combined reach of the local and weekly newspapers of all sectors of the population in Northern Ireland and the unique relationship that exists between local newspapers and the community mean that they have an invaluable role to play and a valuable contribution to make to government's communication messages. And I will be referring to the slide deck that I believe you have copies of throughout. Now, if one of the primary objectives of any communication is to speak to the largest number of people, then as you'll see from slide 4, the local, weekly and daily newspapers together reach in a typical week more than 82% of adults in the population. That's more than 4 out of 5 adults, and it's more than any other media in the country. As you compare that with the 2 nearest comparable markets, as we've done in slide 5, that's the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, you'll see that at that 82% weekly reach, okay, it's not quite as high as it is in the Republic of Ireland, but it's 15% higher than the United Kingdom. The point, however, to contrast with that is the fact that the internet is not quite so well developed here. 67% of adults in Northern Ireland access the internet in some shape or form across a typical week, and that's 15% below both the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom. And when you look specifically at the use of news sites, there's a similar variance shown there. I'll come back to audience in a moment, but just to look briefly at the business performance of newspapers. Slide 6 illustrates the revenue forecasts for newspapers over the next few years. And as you can see, the United Kingdom is the closest measurable market to our own. And as you can see there, that the declines experienced over the last few years appear to have levelled out, and the prognosis for the next few is at worst stable, and that is reflected here as well. However, more significantly, if you look at slide 7, that shows the sources of that revenue. And you can see that currently, and in the foreseeable future, the bulk of that revenue, some 80% or more of it, is forecast to continue to come from print through copy sales and through advertising. It's print that is sustaining the business and is forecast to continue to do so. However, picking up on the points that my colleagues have made about digital, as you can also see that the investments that have been made in digital products are starting to pay dividends. And the forecast increases in revenue seem to come from the public paying for news content. What that means is that they value the quality of news content produced by professional journalists to the point that they are prepared to pay for them rather than opting for more readily available free news content. To come back to audience, and if one of the objectives with government communication messages is to communicate with all sectors of the population, slide 8 and 9 illustrate that whether you're thinking about gender, income groups, age, location, religious persuasion, that local newspapers reach at least 75 and in most cases more than 80% of any group that you care to isolate. And that's some 3 or 4 times more than local news and local interest websites. Now, the reason we compare them with local news and local interest websites as opposed to the internet as a whole is because, of course, anybody wishing to communicate with the Northern Ireland population would be using those kind of websites to do so. Looking at the audience profile in a slightly different perspective, if you think about the makeup of the population and compare that with the makeup of the profile of the local newspaper audience and indeed the local online audience, you'll see from slide 10 that those living in rural areas, the over 55s, low income groups and women are underrepresented currently within the local online audience. However, the audience profile of local newspapers mirrors the population profile almost exactly, and the evidence to support that is in the appendix that you've been provided with. So, to reach big numbers of all sectors of the population, local newspapers will continue to do an excellent job for you, as I say, better than any other medium in the country at the moment. However, as my colleagues have indicated, they are investing in the development of digital products, whether those are websites or mobile applications, with a view to increasing those audiences and helping those who want to communicate with the public to extend their reach as that internet audience grows. And as you can see from slide 11, there is room for further uptake, which seems likely to happen in the future. However, effective communication that registers with the recipient and that affects their thinking and affects their behaviour isn't just about hitting big numbers. The messages need to actually connect with the audience, and they need to be absorbed and they need to be valued by that audience. Now, print media tend to have a head start over broadcast media in that respect because, of course, reading is an active process rather than a passive one. However, the relationship between local newspapers is closely bound to people's relationships with their local community.
Could I maybe just, we've already run over time, and I'm conscious that you appear to be going through the slides that we already have.
Okay.
So you can take it as read that members will have perused those.
Okay.
And really, the more you go over
Like to
time,
summarise.
the less time there'll be for questioning.
Okay.
You know?
What I would say is that relationship proves that the media, that the local newspapers are the most highly trusted medium. They're the one that connects people to their communities, and because a result of that relationship,
Yes.
carry more power and influence, which reflects in the advertising as well as the news content. And as such, as I said at the outset, they have a valuable role to play in government public communication. Sorry for running over.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks very much for that. And I'm sure, like, all of us are very, very aware of that. We're in constant communication with the local regionals and indeed the local papers as well. So, point well made, but any local rep that doesn't understand that really doesn't be a local rep for much longer.
That's good news.
I'd just like to pay tribute to the role of both the regional and the local newspapers in the job that they do. It's very, very important. Now, just one point on clarification, just if you could maybe indicate, Timmy, at slide 16, the details that are provided, it's on our page, for members it's on our page 31. Just if you could indicate that's your page 16 or slide 16, local news brands. Now, for a local newspaper, are you incorporating into that all the local papers that come out weekly, along with regionals as well? And are the likes of papers which are either what are called Dublin National or people refer to them as English National as well, or British National from London, are they incorporated into that if they're printed locally?
No, the local news brands are the ones that are specific to a local region.
Right.
So the local weeklies, the dailies that are represented here, and the weekly newspapers that are represented here.
Okay.
And also the word term news brand encompasses their websites as well as the printed publication.
That's grand. That's grand. And just, Dominic, you mentioned there's some business event this evening. I don't think the committee was informed of that, so maybe...
Yes. The invitations will be in the post for next year. I apologise.
It'll be...
And that's for today's.
Okay, well, I'm sure they can arrange it. Yeah,
You said
Dr.
it,
Stephen
you-
Farry is attending as the Minister representing.
Yes.
But certainly, if anyone would like to attend, we'd like
Well,
to
we're,
extend the
you know,
invitation.
we're business
Such
and the
late notice.
economy. It's always useful, that communication connect that you're talking about there.
Point taken, point taken. Yeah.
It can be done digitally too, but of course. So, just could you provide us, just as we talk about that, and we're going on, you've already taken us into one department, and we're, if you like, the oversight body for ETI. Could you provide us with some indication as to just how much you get in public advertising resource from government departments, or indeed it could be local government as well, or arm's length bodies?
I suppose, for speaking for the Irish News, it would be a significant amount of money, but in some senses, I think it is underrepresented to what it should be. In terms of our advertising revenue, it would probably account for about 15%, about say 7% of our overall revenue. But if you think of Northern Ireland as an economy that's so heavily, public sector, I don't. If you accept that 93% of our other revenues coming from private sector and public, I don't think that. I think we should be generating more from the public sector. And I think, as Jackie's shown, we are a very effective communication tool. And there is some perceptions the government spends too much money in local press. Over the last number of years, that figure has been cut back. It's certainly very heavily scrutinised, and also newspapers do offer very competitive rates.
What about the other outlets then? Is it a similar figure?
It's a similar situation, albeit that advertising revenues, as you appreciate, have been substantially reduced from government, as you would expect during this recession. So similar position, but I would like to say there are some parts of the province, like the North West and the daily papers, not even our own newsletter, penetrate the Derry region in the way it should, and the weeklies titles there have a strength. It's not a huge amount of money. We can provide you with the details by region, but it's an important element given that we're an important voice in the community. We celebrate everything that happens in that community from a government point of view, from a council point of view, and so on. So, yes, a similar position. Really.
Okay.
We'd be exactly the same, very similar position where the amount of revenue has been shrinking over the past number of years, but our audience has been increasing, but we would be in a very similar position to the other titles. It is an important part of our revenue that has been declining over the past number of years.
Okay, thanks for that. And just maybe to aside from showcasing yourselves and coming along here today, what essentially do you want from the committee?
Well, I don't know. I think from our point of view, it's just to put on record, I suppose, the role of the local press. And I think in a sense we have, in many ways, you know, we report the news and sport and everything that goes on, but we haven't really collectively come together in this way before. Just thought it was a useful exercise to show the role that we play, and sometimes I think we do undersell ourselves. And obviously we do compete on a daily basis. We compete for the best news stories to sell and everything else, but on an advertising offering, I think we've demonstrated that it's a very complete offering for local government.
It's terrific to hear, Mr. Chairman, that the members appreciate the value and the role of local press. However, sometimes, particularly because of the publicity that tends to surround the digital products at the moment, perhaps that relationship and the importance of that relation can sometimes get a little bit overlooked or almost taken for granted, and it was really the opportunity really to just say it's still there, it still exists, it's still important, and it delivers from an advertising perspective.
Yep, absolutely. Mr. Flanagan.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for the presentation. I think we'd all acknowledge this is a tough time for the industry. I think advertising revenue from the public sector, but also from the private sector, is going down. I think you're certainly facing challenges there, but also readership's going down for financial and also for technological reasons. But I would try to read all three papers on a daily basis, and I'd try and read them all on an iPad. I think it's just the way things are going.
Hope you pay for it.
The fact that I can read the Irish News at 12:10 at night before I go to bed is brilliant. I don't like having to wait until the next morning and try and read it when there's two children trying to fight with me and I'm trying to eat breakfast. It goes in one ear and out the other. So the fact that I can read tomorrow's news before I go to bed is a very novel thing, and then you forget it in the morning. But if you do miss one of the three papers, you do think that you've missed something. I think that the quality of the local and regional papers is still very good. I think the calibre of journalists and people you have telling stories and reporting the news is certainly up there. It's a very competitive product you have, and the print media plays a crucial role in our society and for the purposes of this committee in our local economy. I grew up in a house where there was newspapers coming in left, right and centre between local papers, regional papers and national papers, and that habit has stayed with me. So I think it's important that from your point of view that you try and get that habit into the people at an early age, because it is a way of getting young people to read. There are problems with literacy and numeracy, and I think that newspapers have a role to play in trying to improve that problem. I always remember sitting at the kitchen table reading the papers as a child. I wouldn't read anything else. They'd throw books at me, but I had no interest in books. But it'd be mad to find out how much Fermanagh was baked by the weekend. Things like that, you know. And it used to be the case, particularly in rural areas, that you went into a shop and the person behind the counter knew exactly who you were and was fit to tell you who was dead in your local community or who was sick, and knew everybody that was connected with that person that was dead or sick and was fit to pass that on. But with the closure of small shops, and we're now seeing bigger shops, that's gone. And that role has to be filled in by other means, and you're not going to find it on Twitter. No. You will find that through your local print media. So I do think that there's an important role there to play. I have a couple of questions here for Jackie from representing all of the industry. So we heard individually the number of employees that the three papers have, but in the whole industry locally, how many employees are there?
Gosh, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Yeah, we could get you that figure.
Certainly
We
get the
had
figure
it
for
a
you.
few years ago. and,
Yeah.
I suppose it's not just the newspapers and the print companies,
Yeah.
then you've the advertising agencies and everything else related to it. It was certainly heading up towards, I think it was over 2,000.
Okay.
But we'll get the figure to you.
Very good. There is a move towards digital content, and a lot of it's consumer driven. Is that presenting more of a challenge or an opportunity to the industry? And has anybody cracked how to do it profitably yet?
In terms of doing it profitably, the initial perception was any content that was produced digitally had to be there for free because that's what everything was. And when Rupert Murdoch, I think he believed he was the first one, said, no, I'm going to charge for content because we have professional journalists who produce credible information that people want to read about, and it merits it. People thought he was insane. But there are a number of different models in existence. There are some newspapers who prefer to distribute their content for free and are hoping to generate revenue from advertising. That's not proving successful at the moment, and there are a number of factors that look as if they will prohibit that. Then the other models range from completely paid content to metered content, which means that you get an element for a period of time, you get an element free for a period of time, then have to pay for it. Or others where there's some generally free content, but more specialist content you actually have to pay for. Now, those paid models, as you saw from the forecast in slide 7, are the ones that are being forecast to be the most effective in the longer term. But ultimately, it depends for each newspaper to a question of looking at their own market, their position with their own market, looking at the strategies and trying the one that they think is going to be most likely to be effective for them.
Okay.
There isn't a simple answer at this stage, Phil, because it's in the process of evolving and publishers are still learning.
And what are the views of newspaper readers? Would they prefer to have an online digital content that the three papers have at the minute, or would they prefer to have just a website where news stories are scattered all over the place and you might miss something?
Well, as you saw from the readership levels from print take your point that while they have been declining, they're still extremely high, particularly in Northern Ireland. Habits do take time to change. The evidence suggests that from a publisher's point of view, making your news content as widely available to the public through as many platforms as is viable is the way that is going to ensure that as many people as possible can engage with that content in the way that works best for them, whether that's you, as you say, I want to pick up the news from an iPad at home at night, or whether I want to have it when I'm on the move or whether I'm on the go. Some people will also consume, and there's quite a lot of evidence to support this, that people will consume their favourite brands, if you like, in terms of the newspapers that they consume through a range of platforms, and they use each of them in different ways. So that the message is the more readily available publishers can make their contents, then the better that is for the audience and for anyone wanting to communicate with that audience.
And finally, in terms of the government advertising, because I presume that's one of your big fears at the minute, has the public sector moved to embrace digital advertising, and then they're doing that in conjunction with the local print media, or they're doing that with other avenues?
Sorry, can you...
In terms of government embracing digital advertising, advertising online instead of through the traditional print media, they have embraced that slightly, but have they done that in conjunction with the print media, or are they just doing it with external agencies?
I suppose in a sense the big fear that we've had is that the government would drive all of the recruitment advertising onto the civil service website, and we would argue that's not really an effective use of the resources. I mean, it's demonstrated that newspapers complementary with their websites do reach the whole population, and it has happened in other parts of the world where government have pulled the advertising from newspapers, fundamentally damaged them, and the newspapers, they will not come back from that. A lot of newspapers have closed in different places. And also the government have failed to get their message out. This happened in Scotland, where they pulled a lot of the jobs onto a government website, and they found that application rates were falling and so on. Because unless people are actively searching for a job, they're not going to find it. Yeah. Newspapers are great for, as you say, somebody sitting at the table reading the paper and they'll spot something. Or even what's very relevant in Northern Ireland is that maybe their father or mother will call them and say, have you seen this job in the newsletter or the Irish News or the Telegraph? So that is why newspapers perform that role so effectively. And there have definitely been attempts made to change that, and we've certainly made a mistake.
If I could just extend on Dominic's point, the way people tend to use digital media is to find things that they're actively looking for. whether that's in terms of newspapers, whether that's in terms of jobs or items that they want to buy or they want to purchase. With the printed the printed product, they are surprised by content. They're browsing and they see things, for example, that might be a public notice, or it could be a job that they're not aware was relevant to them. They wouldn't have actively gone out to look for it, but when they see it, they recognise that there is a relevance, there's something that they want to know more about, or way in which they want to react to it. And that is one of the sort of distinguishing features, if you like, of newspapers.
Right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil, thank you. Mr. New, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the information so far. I have some general points, but if I could bring up a specific issue, Sarah, about the Beltel coverage. This committee, as you'll know, scrutinises Arlene Foster. I would always argue, a bit like your own profession, our role isn't to be nice, it's to be effective in what we do. But I think there's lines in that, and something that I have to say annoyed me at the time, and I say maybe I should have just wrote about it at the time rather than raise it now, but you're here and I'm going to take the opportunity, was when Arlene Foster's father died. Front page of the Belfast Telegraph was a zoomed in picture of Arlene Foster crying at her father's funeral. I'm quite pleased by the fact that Northern Ireland hasn't in a big way went down that personal life of politicians route. In terms of that decision, why did you decide that was in the public interest or in the paper's interest to print it?
I have responsibility solely for the commercial aspects of the paper, and there is a very strong line between commercial and editorial.
Sure.
So I have absolutely no input into the editorial aspects of the paper, but our editor is sitting behind me. I'm sure he'd be delighted to speak to you maybe after this session.
Okay.
Yes, that'll be appropriate. If there are issues of concern around editorial, whatever members can individually maybe go and have a chat with editorial people.
I think our readers want to see the humans behind government as well. So and as a reader myself, you know, you do want to see the human. I don't think our reputations as local newspapers here in Northern Ireland, you know, we act with integrity at all times. Our credibility is high. We're trusted, and the research links back to that and supports that argument. So that's all I would comment on it. It is not our intention as local newspapers to, you know, provide the story that that hurts any one individual.
I just think on the general point, I think Northern Ireland's been good and not going down the line of some of the UK national tabloids of really kind of focusing in. I think there's a time when there's a crossover between any public individual, not just politicians, between their personal life and their professional, but I think when clearly a shot's taken from a distance, the person not given permission, they're not given consent, and I think it crosses a line. But I suppose more on what you're here for. Jean, you made reference to the importance of local media in terms of its role in democracy, and has already been alluded to. We all use the newspapers as a vehicle for getting our message across. But you mentioned, and it's probably true, particularly of the newsletter and the Irish News, I think Belfast Telegraph would say they're moving away from it, that there's a very conscious political slant. How does that inform democracy? I mean, it's not unusual. We get it across society.
Well, you know, on the newspaper, we've got a mix of titles in our weeklies, and they cross different communities. But our focus is on we're the voice of the communities we serve. We don't have pull our readers kicking and screaming. We're the voice of that community, so we're representing their thoughts, really. The newsletter is absolutely, unashamedly pro-British, pro-union, pro-law and order, and pro-rural countryside. That's what it stands for. It likes readers are honest, hard-working, church-going, law-abiding citizens. We know them very well. They don't like
the rest of your readers.
They obviously don't.
All the thousands of them. You speak for each one of them.
You know,
so.
on the other hand,
What do you think of the Irish News? I'm not going to make such lofty statements about our readers.
No, I don't think anybody could really. I think maybe a wee bit OTT there, but anyway.
the Derry Journal, on the other hand, represents a very distinct community too, albeit that it
Careful.
also has duplicated readership, you know, so we're the voice of the community. I think that's really.
But in terms, obviously, we live in a divided society in different ways. I mean, every politically or whatever else. Surely balanced content serves democracy more than saying this is what you are and we'll tell you what you want to hear.
Well, it's you know, our readers are the purchasers of the paper. They're the audience online, and interestingly, our online audience is somewhat different. You know, we celebrate the culture and heritage of the readership the newsletter represents, and many of the titles do. We are supportive, obviously. We're supportive of law and order. All of those things. Our readers don't like paramilitaries of any sort, whether from loyalist paramilitaries or wherever. Absolutely don't. In fact, at any time in the past, it's a long distance past, probably before my time we've ever run such a story. But they're interested in celebrating their own culture and heritage. So we must respond to the needs of our readers and audience. But we are supportive of moving forward, absolutely, and the readership absolutely reflects that.
Dominic, from your own point of view, I mean, the other side of the coin, I suppose, I mean, the Irish News would certainly be considered nationalist paper. The readership presumably would be predominantly nationalist.
Yes.
Again, I suppose just the same question about serving democracy and indeed debate.
Yes.
If you just tell people what they want to hear, what you think they already believe.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's very true. We would firstly believe it's our duty to report the news accurately and also to break the news if we could. In terms of reporting the news, we believe we do report it as it happens. We would also, but the difference would be with our opinion pieces and columnists and so on. The Irish News has always been open to columnists and opinion from all sectors, and why we would not shy away from the fact that we are a nationalist newspaper. We've always had unionist columnists, for instance, writing for the paper. We still do, and we encourage debate. And I think in the sense that newspapers are a reflection of, like you say, it's divided society, we have different views, but it's not even just the politics of it. I mean, sport would be a very big part of the Irish News, and Gaelic sports are the biggest sport in Ireland, biggest participation sport. We would cover that extensively because our readers want that, and that's basically the community that we serve. It wouldn't make as much sense for the newsletter to cover it in the same way. So there are differences within the paper. But essentially, in terms of how we cover the news and business and so on, we're trying to get the best stories and trying to break stories and present them fairly and accurately and not put a slant on them.
I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. It goes back to, you know, the role of newspapers, and it's a bigger question than for today. But if the newsletter did publish more GAA sports, people aren't going to buy the paper for that, but it might normalise GAA in the unionist communities.
Well, we do cover some Gaelic, obviously not to the extent that that the Irish News do, and who do it extremely well. So we do reach out. It's and particularly in the farming community, you know, our Catholic readership increases on a Saturday, so we're reaching out through other areas. But it's papers here have either been in one community. It's the historic thing. You know, it's a difficult one. We'll all make progress as time goes on, but that's really the reality of the situation, really.
Okay, unless
Can I just add a final point on that? Dominic mentioned the sort of competitive nature of the market here. The other perspective on that is that for the population, for the readers in Northern Ireland, that means the choice is unparalleled. So you've got 3 strong daily newspapers, you've got titles that emanate from the UK, you've got titles that emanate from the Republic, and that, you know, not only does that evidence the appetite for news, it means that the consumer in Northern Ireland can choose and can compare and can contrast, and that's a tremendous thing for the industry and for the public.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay, just thinking of the various themes that have been developed here, maybe bordering, or well, taking us into the political and likes that. Just an interesting concept. Well, there's 2 things, 2 different themes. One, you talk about being, your instance, pro-British, and I know the Irish News reflects largely its readership within the nationalist community. Politically, and I was listening very carefully to the comments that you were making there, Jean, do you lead or follow? That's the first thing. In other words, creating the political climate, do you just respond, or do you create and indeed initiate debate and intellectually challenge people politically. And the second thing then is an actual concept of delivery of news. I've watched and I've seen, if you like, some of the newspapers, particularly Dublin based, the newspapers, as in delivering news, have just gone. The likes of the Sunday Press has gone, the likes of the Tribune has gone, which did deliver news. And you have the likes of the Sunday Independent there, which by and large has bits and pieces of news in it, but by and large it's opinion pieces right throughout it. Now, there's the evolution, there's a challenge in all of that. In the modern day and age where you have the likes of Twitter, where news is instant and right out there like that, what are the challenges that face the newspaper industry in actually coming up with news rather than moving to that situation where you have just opinion pieces around what is already established news? So there's two questions in that.
Okay, well, anyway.
One is
Also, in the sense that, I
politically,
mean, the old-fashioned breaking good news stories is still the mainstay of certainly, I believe, the local press. Increasingly, with the emergence of all the digital content, it is more difficult to do because, you know, as Mr. Flanagan said, he's able to read the Irish News before he goes to sleep at night. Even if we have an exclusive story, it'll be picked up in the morning. Quite often, news is cannibalised by other media organisations, and you mightn't get the credit for it and so on. But the three local papers do, by and large, set a large percentage of the agenda for the news in Northern Ireland, and it is picked up and developed from there. So that challenge always continues. With the papers, as you mentioned, going out of business, they generally, those creates a vacuum that isn't replaced, and picking up news and things on Twitter is all well and good, but an awful lot of that again comes back to the actual newspapers. So if you imagine if the papers weren't publishing, you'd be picking up hearsay and comment from people and so on, but newspapers do a job of curating the news, making sure it's accurate and believable. That's what people trust.
I would also add as well, to a certain extent, we do create some of the news, some of the examples that we give, and I know there's examples with the other two titles, the apprenticeship scheme, The Young. We do actively go out there to look and see what's important to people within Northern Ireland and report that back through the pages of our titles, and that, as I say, is equal measure for all three titles.
okay. Then lead or follow.
We, as Dominic said, I just keep referring back to what he said. You know, the news agenda. We lead the news agenda. It's really the integrity of the story, what's happening. We feel we have got a responsibility to deliver an accurate. We don't. You know, we're not influencing it. We're reflecting the reality, really, and that's the difference with local press here. You know, it's not our role to make a big story out of nothing. You know, we're here to accurately reflect the news as it happens, really.
Okay, right, thank you. Mr. Dunn, Gordon.
Thanks very much, folks, for coming in this morning. Reporting
He
on...
reads Irish news before he goes to sleep.
No, I don't because I wouldn't sleep.
He quoted it here one morning.
I don't read the Irish news. That's not the
Phil would have
question.
tweeted on it.
But no, serious. How do you go about reporting on the work of the Northern Ireland Assembly and the particularly executive, and how significant do you think it is that you do that in a positive manner? Because we don't see much of it, to be frank. It's all very negative, and I think I've been here for over 3 years, and I must say the reporting on the executive, the work of the Assembly has been very negative and has had an impact, I think, on the public. When we go out round the doors and talk to the people that do read your papers, I think it comes across that what we are doing here is of little significance, and we're not communicating, we're not getting out that message, and I think you are not doing a great job in getting that message out to people.
Well, I think in that this is probably not the forum, Mr. Dunn, to discuss in detail. But we're always our door is always open. I think we should be communicating. We should be communicating better. You know, with each other if there are issues that you feel like this. But probably this is not the.
But I think, you know,
I'm
not talking on a party political basis. I'm talking generally about the work of the Assembly and the executive. I don't think it's reported positively at all.
I suggest the fact that the editors are here today
Yeah,
it opens the conduit for
Yeah,
further discussion or debate around that?
Not reported.
As Jean said, it's a big topic.
Sometimes not
You
reported.
know, the other issues such as the Invest NI had one of their best years ever. How well do you think you reported on that? Was it certainly none of us seemed to see it in the headlines. They had the best year of growth, more jobs created, more work done to increase the potential for jobs, and yet that sort of headline just doesn't seem to grab or fit in with the newspapers of today.
Well, we were doing an analysis of the papers, and our editor is here to talk. I mean, we think that Arlene Foster, would probably be in the paper, certainly our paper, more than any other government minister. And we would always report on any job announcements positively, and we would give it full coverage. I know there is a perception that it's only bad news we report, but really I think if you examine the papers, there is an awful lot of what happens here is reported without any comment or any opinion in a very factual manner. And we are really just reporting the news. We're not going out of our way to distort it.
I would just support what Dominic has said in that. I think the Minister appears more in her business section than any other. So I would absolutely support what he just said.
Contend as well that we would have a strong business offering on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. We have our business awards that happened at the latter half of last year, which the Minister attended, and it was to celebrate and showcase the work that we are doing in Northern Ireland and how strong the economy is.
How do you feel that if you don't want to get involved in the politics of, how do you see your communication with the public is doing in relation to what is happening up here on the Hill?
Well, I suppose we would cover it extensively. I mean, if I was very honest, it doesn't sell newspapers. It wouldn't encourage people to pick up the Irish News if we led with the Assembly business every day. And that's really just being truthful about it. People do want to be informed and want to know what's going on, and I think we do give it a responsible amount of coverage.
You do? A certain slant on it, perhaps. The Belfast Telegraph, I must say, as a unionist, I feel most disappointed with the Belfast Telegraph. I do buy the Telegraph. I find it difficult to buy it, but I do. I buy the newsletter every day. But the Telegraph, if they hadn't got the stories on health, I don't think the negative stories about health in this country, I think, are absolutely scandalous, to be perfectly frank. And the amount of people that go through the health service who are satisfied with it and come out with positive stories, the Belfast Telegraph don't seem to be interested in it whatsoever. And the campaigns that have been run about health, I find, are despicable, to be frank with you. And how our ministers portray it and the work of the health service generally, and professionals within it, I think deserve better, and I must say it's most disappointing.
I think maybe just on that, we have to respect you're the commercial people, and if there are particular interests, Gordon, that you have or Stephen has, I do know the editorial people.
Well, I hope to get the message.
Are with us.
Appreciate it.
And they can, if you want to have a chat with them too, certainly outside the meeting, that's grand.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the message needs to go. It needs to be more of a fair and balanced reporting of what goes on within the Executive Assembly.
Can we leave that, and if you wish to reflect that personally one-on-one with the editorial staff, happy enough to go with that. So. Was that you finished, Gordon?
Well, generally, the other point I would make, I suppose, is about ownership and pride of place is something that you should really be working on. The local papers too do struggle to sell. I know in the area I represent in North Down, the newsletter wouldn't have a big readership. The Telegraph would have a significant readership. The local papers there do a good job in reporting what we do locally. But again, they're under great pressure, and it is difficult to try and increase the readership. Staffing levels, obviously, we are aware, have been reduced in a lot of the papers because of those pressures. A lot of people, I understand, are no longer directly employed, but a lot of it is done through freelance work. Is that generally the way within your organisations?
We would employ over 350 people within the Belfast Telegraph directly, and then on top of that there would be, and that would cover our printing presses in Newry and Belfast, our wholesale distribution network, and then the staff within the building as well. And on top of that, there would be a number of freelancers and agency staff employed, yes.
What about the other papers?
Well, we employ 220 directly. We do use, given our geographic footprint, which is predominantly rural, we do then probably well over 100 other freelance contributors. Well, and probably, I mean, if I looked at it, it's probably more than that. But obviously, the recent recession has hit advertising revenues hard across all sectors of the media and the regional press. We've had to adjust accordingly, while at the same time invest in the technology and the people, and provide solutions so that we can continue to deliver quality. So it's not an easy one. Technology moves forward and so on, but we're still substantial employers in the Northern Ireland market. And obviously, like every other business, it's evolved, you know, as technology has.
And existing staff have to be trained to be able to produce news for digital devices as well as for print. And advertising people have to be trained to understand how they work and how they complement each other. So there's an investment in that, in the reskilling, as well as the actual employment.
Okay, folks, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. McKinney,
Thank you very much, Chair. And I hope, given Mr. Dunn's comments, which are sort of obviously negative, that if he were in charge of the advertising budget, he would probably maybe recommend cutting it. But I hope that isn't the case in the wider
I don't think it was ever mentioned, for with all due respect.
No.
Anyway, Chair, I don't declare an interest because I don't have one, but given my background, I am obviously interested in a strong local media presence. I do believe that it forms part of the community here and can lead in leading communities, and I'd like to see a good, strong future. Obviously, a committee like ours has got to scrutinise money, and if you like, a lot of this conversation is about the commercial relationship that you have with government. But we need to see value for money. So it concerns me whenever I see some of the statistics that you've presented here, particularly around slide 8, where you're saying that the local newspaper reach to females, for example, is 82 versus a 16 rate in digital. And what would concern me there is that, you know, is there potential that government policy around advertising or reducing it in local papers could lead to discrimination against women?
Clearly, you're given as the market stands at the moment, as I mentioned, certainly as far as the consumption of digital is concerned, there are groups that are unrepresented. First of all, they will not receive the messages, which is arguably the most important thing. Could there then be potential discrimination? Well, one's got to say that given the facts as they stand at the moment, Mr. McKinney, that could well be the case, yeah. But that's not to say that things will not change in the future.
Who do you put these arguments to? In terms of is there a central decision-making group within government that makes a decision about where the money's spent? Or is this with all government departments?
No, I mean, our purpose today, obviously, is, as we said, to present the position to yourselves, and then individual discussions tend to be held between individual newspapers and the government's advertising unit, and individual departments within the advertising unit and their advertising agencies. There are two arguments that would be presented, well, several arguments that would be presented there. One would be the importance of advertising per se. The second would be the value, or the relative value, of the local news brands relative to other media, and then the individual value of the specific newspapers and specific newspaper groups within that. So it's a series of dialogues.
Yes, but I suppose what I'm driving at, do you get the sense, or is it, do you get the sense that there is a policy decision around, over and above a commercial decision, around whether they advertise in newspapers or online?
Can I suggest that maybe those of you who have a direct...
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the past there have been attempts to remove things like public notice advertising from newspapers. We've been aware that there has been a move to try to take the recruitment advertising out of the newspapers and put it on the government website. And I think, firstly, you couldn't possibly see how that could pass in the quality impact assessment. It just would not work for the reasons that Jackie's outlined. Huge sections of the society would not see those ads, but it also would not be an effective way of trying to recruit into government. So yeah, we are aware. It's very hard to be specific as to who's driving it, and certainly we would welcome the opportunity to put our case to whoever the most appropriate people within the structures of government were.
All of you have tried different models in relation to online yourselves. Irish News has taken a different approach to others. But you have, I suppose at the outset of all of the online stuff, people felt it would go one particular direction. I don't want you to go into a whole lot of narrative, but where do you think it has ended up, and is the journey, where is it?
The journey is very much it's on the way at the moment. Certainly the digital products are being developed because people understand how they work and how people are consuming them better, and that in turn allows you to increase audiences, which is in everybody's interest. And mobile devices, that's bringing a whole new dimension to it. You know, it's been the year of mobile since about 2004, but at last, the technology is in place to make that yet another platform. And the model for mobile may well turn out to be different from the model for websites. So it is still very much in evolution and developing at the moment.
And is government recognising the strength of your online presence as another means of conveying its message and therefore allowing you to
well, no, I suppose our fear is that they try to use their own online message, and
are they competing with you?
Yes, in a sense they are. You've had the same situation in sort of local government in England, where instead of advertising in the local newspapers, they've gone as far as printing their own recruitment newspapers and distributing them, which is crazy. I mean, it just does not work.
There's a sense sometimes, if we build it, they will come. In other words, we've got a site and we've got a social presence, therefore people will come and seek us out. But there are cases, and it doesn't just apply to government, where unless that is being promoted to a wider audience, they don't know that it's there, they don't know what they can find there, and therefore they're not seeking it out.
And is there any measurement done on this in terms of the effectiveness of government advertising? And maybe, Chair, it might be worthwhile us finding whoever it is to ask and asking them, are they getting value for taxpayers' pounds in the method that they're proposing in terms of advertising, and would there be better value? I'm not asking for a big pot of money to go to you, that's not what I'm saying. I want to see the value for the money spent. So even if they're spending less but it's not getting to the right place, then that's not money well spent.
Absolutely right.
So, as I say, you can see where I'm coming from this, and I think we do, this is provoking in my mind at least, I don't know if it's in the committee's mind, that some questions should be asked about the value for money that government is presently taking vis-a-vis what's been proposed here.
You're absolutely right, Mr McKinney, and in terms of evaluation of media value is actually very complex and difficult across media. What I would certainly say is, looking at the market here and compared with, for example, the United Kingdom, the value delivered by news brands, by press here, compared to comparable newspapers, is actually extremely good. If you took a newspaper of a similar size circulation to, say, the Belfast Telegraph, the Irish News, the newsletter, and looked at the published rates, the rates here are competitive, and having 3 newspapers in the market helps to keep it competitive.
Yes, but that's the price that you're charging. I'm not so much focused on that commerciality of it. I'm focused on the value for money of government pounds. And if government is saying we're saving a load of money, but in fact the advertising is only
nobody's saying it, what's the point?
What I'm saying is it's not your job to do that. Neither is it ours. It's our job to ask that question, I think, if that's fair. In terms of, and this might chime with what Mr Dunn's been saying about, message and all the rest, have you thought about, in the context of new emerging local government, for example, of adding value in terms of how you might attract more money out of local government in terms of a greater focus on news there or correspondence?
Well, I suppose as the council's change and so on, the reporting of that's going to be very, very important to us. So it's that we're discussing in the paper. Whether there'll be any more money to spend, I suppose we don't know. I'd love to think that there would be, but it's obviously going to be a very important part of our coverage going forward. Whether we get any advertising from it or not, because frankly we won't decide what we cover just on the basis of the advertising. That'll always be done on the value of the news content in it. But it's something we would certainly be looking at over the next year.
Okay, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. Just to get back to that slide 8, where, if you like, the penetration and the reach of the population groups, and you mentioned the disparities there between male and female and the like. But how are you commercially adapting to a situation where, and I do know this, some people, not in the public sector, but some people have looked at, say for example, the entertainment industry, have looked at the situation, they say, right, depending on what market they're going for, if it's a young market, it's Facebook. That's just where you go and capture Facebook and cut back on commercial advertising. Clearly, there's a threat or opportunity there for how you adapt to that particular market. And again, the online, because this analysis of, suppose, maybe, 500 or 1,000 people, but the online usage that people will adapt to and will, as if you like, the age profile changes with people with, if you like, experience of smartphones and that start to get older, this profile will inevitably change in those figures if you're taking, say, in 10 years' time. How is the print media adapting to that situation to make sure that, say for example, if, as some of them are good, and the local press, particularly Johnston paper, the likes of the Tyrone Times, the Mid-Ulster Mail, those are very, very good with their online presence on Twitter, and straight off you can go in and get the contemporary news stories. How are the print media, and this isn't a case for the regional papers, this is for the locals as well, if you're to change and adapt that situation to make sure that accessibility is immediate to good news stories, good websites, and up to date, that's really down to the standards that those local papers adopt themselves, or their owners adopt, to make sure they commercially are adapting to that change. Because if they don't adapt to change, really it's going to mean one course for them, kind of downhill.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman, and it goes back to the point that I was making about publishers ensuring that the content is available through whichever platforms people want to get it from, so that whatever age and stage you're at, wherever you live, you can get the news content from the brand or the newspaper brands of your choice whenever you want it, wherever you want it. And that's obviously something that the publishers here are working on and adapting to at the moment. Right. And alongside that, then we also have to develop our understanding of how people are consuming it, who's consuming what, and make sure that we're marketing to them in an effective way as well, so that, going back to some of the points that were made earlier about the fact that I see the newspapers, I know the names of them, I know what they are, so I know where to look online, that people don't lose that sense of what they are, and that's extremely important.
I think it would be very helpful.
There's also a skilling
whenever
as
a collective, if you arrive at the point of saying, right, you've referred to ongoing work there at the moment, we have introduced new methods, or collectively you've arrived at the point where you feel you have adapted or moved that change. It'll be, obviously the change itself will be changing, but if you have something that you could collectively maybe present to us, or indeed if we could go down and visit the respective newspapers someday, I think that, for me anyway, that would be very helpful.
We'd be delighted to do that. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we're very happy to do that.
Thanks. Have Mr. McLaughlin now. Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation. For me, the slide 8 is quite significant in that it deals with, in my view, I suppose the kind of the strategic issue changes in the the demographics of those who read newsprint and who would rely on online, and that cohort from 15 to 34. I'm just wondering whether there was any disaggregation in terms of the statistics. In terms of what that cohort would expect to get in newsprint, and what that would indicate for the future. And I mean, clearly there is, as I would say, a strategic interest for the industry. If in fact that's the group, and they are the group that's more likely to be dynamic and changing. So government would be interested in terms of getting best return for advertising expenditure, and clearly the industry would be critically kind of affected by any kind of change in patterns there. So I suspect in that, although it's not in the slide and I couldn't find it in any of the others, I just wonder if we went, say, to a different kind of cohort, maybe the digital age people, 15, middle 20s, and if their pattern of using newsprint as opposed to online indicates the direction of travel.
It's a very valid point, Mr McLaughlin. Now, what slide 8 and 9, what they're showing is they're showing the percentage of people in each group that are consuming newspapers or consuming news websites. In your appendix, there was also a chart which showed, if you take the population as a whole, for example, 34% of the population here currently are aged between 15 and 34 years old. 33% of the audience to the local news brands are in that age group. So, and I would say that local news brands, I mean the newspapers and their websites together, so they are delivering the news in such a way as
No,
to...
I'm asking, but if we narrowed the band,
Okay.
would that produce a different set of statistics? If we are showing here 78% who use newsprint, would they be in the upper bracket of that 34, middle 30s?
We could probably
age
get
band?
16 to 25, but we wouldn't be able to narrow them any further than that, just because the sample sizes would be too small to be legitimate. But we could certainly have a look
I'm
at that.
suggesting it's in your commercial
We could
interest to
certainly have a
know
look at to do that,
what
yeah.
is
No,
likely
I
to happen.
completely- yeah, take your
Because
point.
these people, for us, we're interested because they're going to be voting in a couple of
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
the industry would need to know what
certainly
they're
give-
going to rely on for their information in the same period.
We could certainly give you 16 to 25s.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing that disaggregated, that particular.
Yep.
And really, just to say that I think, I perfectly understand why there are different constituencies being addressed here, because as politicians, and I think that, it's a fair and actually quite professional representation, as far as I can see across the board, necessitating making the effort to read all the newsprints. But you do actually find when you go around the doors in elections that people are also reading the papers and you're getting feedback, some of it quite interesting. So in fairness, there are a lot of jobs at stake. There are some very professional people involved, particularly in reportage and analysis. And I think between you all, we get the main balance that we're entitled to, and I think probably as well served as any consumer group could expect. So, thank you very much for that. But I suspect that we are dealing with a very volatile and dynamic situation in relation to online versus newsprint, and I suspect the tide is changing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Okay. That you, Mitchell?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Mr Douglas, Sammy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I thought that this presentation was very good, so thank you very much. And in terms of, I know Mitchell talked about representations, in terms of your forum, who else would be involved in it? Because I was thinking, you've got the Andersonstown News in Belfast, you've got the Shannon Electric as an example, who reach into a lot of those, particularly the working class communities. So could you give us a wee bit more background, who else would be involved?
I think, the groups represented today really came about just through the daily newspapers and through some dialogue actually with Government Advertising Unit.
Right.
And it evolved from there, and that's really as far as things have got to date. That's not to say that obviously the forum might not be enlarged then to include all the publishers across the whole of Northern Ireland.
I'm sure you picked up from my colleague, and including Stephen as well, that at times relationships with politicians can be quite fraught in that sense, and I've found this particularly helpful. So I think we should try and do this again, and maybe at some stage. But are there any other ways that you can communicate with the political representatives here? An example would be that from time to time I would get surveys, but the surveys would be: do you read Irish News? Do you read the Newsletter? Do you do Telegraph or whatever? Do you have any other linkages with politicians? To find out. I know you hear us on you see us on TV or on the radio or whatever, or you interviews about certain situations. But are any other linkages, any ideas about trying to build up a relationship to find out? Because we do represent the communities, warts and all, problems and all.
I think on our website, on Debate NI, we have the opportunity to blog, and I know some people avail of that and some don't. So we're always very, very welcome. Would welcome any input or any opportunity to have that dialogue with you.
Yeah, I think as the digital offerings sort of become more extensive and across all platforms, that will open up much more opportunity for debate, both with readers and so on. I mean, the letters pages of all the newspapers are very important parts of it. It'll become a lot more interactive and a lot faster and more responsive, I think, in the digital sphere.
In terms of the help from government, and you talked about the whole advertising, are any other areas where you would seek help or you would get financial help? It strikes me, I remember a number of years ago there was there was a newspaper got some money from one of the government agencies. I think it was either Making Belfast Work or Belfast Regeneration. It was a £1 million print or whatever. But are there other opportunities, or do you avail of any other opportunities from Invest Northern Ireland? Have you ever?
We have never, ever availed of any support. We're not aware of it. So no, we stand on our own 2 feet. Really.
Likewise for us, we started the printing company 9 years ago, and we were told there was no assistance available for it, so it's a huge investment for us, which we had to make on our own. But I suppose in a sense it was a vote of confidence in the industry and a vote of confidence in where we are. So although there's a lot of doom and gloom talk, Northern Ireland still has a very strong industry. And I think we're not really asking for handouts or anything here, we're just asking for a fair share of what we think we deserve.
And I suppose just to support that, we strongly feel that the local papers reach the audience that government need to reach, and all the issues that we've talked about with regard to equality and so on. It's vitally important because we, for instance, the newsletter, have a high percentage of solus readers. That means they read no other newspaper and they're rural. So I would just like to add that to what Dominic has said.
And Jean, just going on that in terms of, you obviously big readership in rural areas. I represent East Belfast and worked in areas like Sado and the Shackle and that as well. And someone told me recently that the newsletter isn't sold within the Shackle Road, as an example. Is that the truth?
I'm not aware of that. I'll pick it up, and it would actually be good to have a chat about it.
But it would be good to find out how you can, build up relationships with those communities. Final question. Dominic, you mentioned about doom and gloom at times there. What does the future hold for the newspaper industry? In light of there's an upturn in the economic market, there are more people actually, some government as well.
More people turning to oil and gas, so not lighting their fires in the morning.
That's an order bit. But in terms of advertising, as an example, we're big ask checking that question.
If you refer you back to slides 6 and 7, now the nearest measurable market to our own is, as I said, it's the United Kingdom, and it's been a tough time both for newspapers, both in terms of, predominantly in terms of advertising, but also in terms of copy sales. But the forecasts for the next few years are that things do seem to have levelled out. That the worst case scenario is that they will stay flat, and that there might even be a little uplift.
Yeah.
Where the change will come about, if you look at slide 7, is that while print advertising revenues are forecast to remain strong, print circulation revenues may decline somewhat, but print digital content is forecast to be where the opportunity really is for news publishers.
Yeah. And just finally, Chair, my colleague Gordon showed me just some breaking news there. There are £10 million investment and 85 jobs. So
front page news across all newspapers.
I might even buy the Irish News.
Make sure it's there for you.
Is it in the media sector?
Okay. Again, thanks so much for your presentation.
Just on that, you threw up an interesting point for me, and I'm going to sort of pursue it now. Not for yourself. You said that Invest NI haven't provided you with any support in the past. I'm sort of wondering if you're manufacturing, if the actual process of producing a newspaper is manufacturing, and I'm sure some of your product goes overseas, i.e. export. I'm just wondering who has
open a call centre,
drawn a line to say that you can't.
Well, we certainly approached Invest NI when we were going back into the printing business, and we were told there wasn't any money available, and strangely enough, they didn't even classify printing newspapers as manufacturing, which I find hard to believe because it's hard to see what else.
It's a bit unusual. I think members agree we should get that clarified with Invest NI just at that point. Okay, great. And finally then, yourself, Sandra.
Okay,
this
thanks.
is over end.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks very much for outlining your challenges and what lies ahead. It's been interesting. I think the challenge for the other two publications, Dominic, you're at it already. As Phil had said, is to get your paper out before midnight, because I too would find that very useful. So that's one of the challenges you can take away from today. I get what you're saying about people reading newspapers and they find news stories, whereas when you're on the internet, you're looking for something. I think that probably is very true. And when I read the newspapers online, I like to see the newspaper and turn the pages. And I think that's really good, and the Belfast Telegraph has changed to have that accessible now. So I appreciate that, because in the digital world, I think we depend on alerts quite a bit. I don't know, and I get alerts from the Northern Ireland Executive on Twitter, so I see the news before it even gets your length, which means maybe I'm not reading the news when it gets your length.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how you're eliminating, and people all over will be eliminating the newspapers in that way. They're getting the news as it's released by whoever's making the news. So I suppose that's a challenge that you're facing, and so I'm kind of wondering, you know, as the history of print media, of newspapers, how have you got the new skills into your businesses? Where have you found those people that come into the businesses, or is it the people that are already there working in the business have just adapted their ways and means? So I'm just wondering where you're finding those skill sets.
I think we would have a mixture of both, retraining existing staff and then bringing new people in with a new skill set, and that will be across the editorial function, the commercial function, and the newspaper sales and marketing function. So it really is a combination of graduates coming up with a new skill set and also upskilling the existing staff that we already have.
Oh, I know.
Newspapers generally have been investing very heavily in that over the last 5 to 10 years. Because it is challenging. If somebody has always been a print journalist, to then start to think, as you say, Ms. Overend, about breaking news and what's a suitable headline for that, and how does the story have to be adapted, how do the pictures have to be adapted. And it's also changing thinking, change of cultures. It's quite right, it's a tough job.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, as Northern Ireland is a skill set here in Northern Ireland for you to do that? Have you had to look outside?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The skill set here. In the main, I would think the majority, we would be the same as the others have mentioned. We've developed our own people, but mainly it's you know, we've done it through training, developing and investing in the people within the business, really.
Yeah, in our own case, we just recruited 3 new people to work on the digital programme that we're working on, and the lady who's the digital editor is somebody originally from here, from Ballinhinch, who was working in a senior position in the Times in London. Yeah. And luckily for us, she wanted to come back home to live, so we were lucky enough to get her, and the other 2 people were recruited locally. It was a mix.
Oh, that's good to hear. And that's really all I was after, but no, thanks very much. I was surprised to see the statistics and that there wasn't more accessing through digital media, that we are still quite traditional.
And that's one of the reasons that we actually included those, because it's very easy to get the perception that everybody's doing everything in the digital world, whereas that's not the case at the moment.
I mean, I read newspapers on the iPad. You know, you don't have to carry around dirty newspapers. Unfortunately, that's nothing personal. Yeah. But you know, when but that's how I access the news. So congratulations on all the things that you do. But
the newspaper and battery will never go for that.
You never have any problems with the signal on it either.
I think the way we would look upon it is that,
Sandra, was that you
from over your head?
Yeah.
Okay, Phil, you wanted to make a brief point.
Just one more point. Jean, we've heard both from the Irish News and the Belfast Telegraph that they're open to hearing from diverse and different voices. The Irish News and the Telegraph both regularly have commentators from outside their traditional audience base. And you've acknowledged that every Saturday the Catholic readership of the newsletter increases because of the excellent farm and supplement you have. But yet every Saturday I lift it to read it. There's an opinion piece in it from a member of the DUP or the UUP or some other unionist politician.
It's a terrible thing.
Has the newsletter given any consideration to allow a nationalist or a Republican to have a voice within the newsletter in such an unedited forum?
Well, we have a platform piece which is open to absolutely everybody. I think the question that I would put back, how many have have shown an interest in actually, but it's absolutely open. I'm quite happy to talk to the editor is behind me here. Quite happy to talk, and we have actually. He can probably stack up and talk to you about them. We do run a mix of columnists, not all in line with the ethos of the paper. However, happy as always, to contact. But I would probably say less come forward to us looking for a platform. So
Well, that's something I'll challenge internally,
Yeah.
and see if there's a willingness to do that. My final question's for you, Dominic. Upstairs in my room hangs the Irish News Ulster GA calendar. And you can go back to John Bradley and tell him that I'm
You want it started again?
disgusted that there's no Fermanagh person in it. You know, there's 9 counties in Ulster. There's nobody from Fermanagh in that calendar. So if you want me to buy it next year, but somebody from Fermanagh in it. Right.
That was a
That's
good.
it.
I don't know whether that's a point I don't know whether that's a point about the Irish News or a point about Fermanagh.
Calendar, Patsy. Calendar.
I know. Well,
Enough said.
okay, and Sammy, you want to make another?
Just
So they know to
quick
run
point.
on next year.
I suppose that very often I would say to people that Stormont, we in Stormont, the representatives here, we reflect the Northern Ireland community, warts and all. And I suppose what you're saying today as well, that you reflect the Northern Ireland community. Well, when I look back over this past number of years, I see Noel Dorn here, and Noel and others would have been involved in joint editorials, and that actually appealed to people, you know, that you hear people come together to say, let's think of some of the good things. And I think even up here, when we get direct together at times and we present the United Front, I think the Giro d'Italia was a feel-good factor for us all. Have you any plans to do likewise in terms of maybe doing some sort of project in the future, or do you have those sorts of discussions?
So we do, and it's a very good question, and glad you brought it up, because obviously in the past there were some hugely significant things that the 3 papers came together to do, like the Pole for Peace and things like that. I suppose we would tend to think it's probably only appropriate to do it when there's a really significant occasion. But it's certainly, I think, we do cooperate together when it's appropriate, and that's exactly the sort of thing we would always be open to considering. So yes.
Thanks, Dominic.
But you're not waiting until there's a Sinn Féin spokesperson on an orange platform?
Phil's available.
Philip.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for coming along today, and I will hopefully follow up whenever you've evolved your new systems to the state that they hope to be evolved to. So thanks very much for coming along and being with us today. It's always very refreshing, and I know we strayed slightly into editorial stuff there, but that was inevitability going to happen where you have politicians and media reps in the one room. But I think the key fundamental point is, fortunately enough, politicians don't control what goes into the media, and it's a key pillar of any free democracy.
Or any of our departments.
Yes, that's right. To challenge politicians and public figures where they need challenged, and that's what you're there to do the job of. So thanks very much for being with us, and I look forward to meeting again. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members
We're
of the
going to get some
committee.
follow-up for
And
the
we-
correspondence, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll follow up on the piece of information that we
Thank
said
you.
we'd deliver
Yeah.
for you.
Okay.
We'll be watching the headlines.
Well, thank you
Thank you all very much.
Okay, so thank you again for your time, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
And Patsy, just for Gordon, the technology available in these things, it was fit to see that the Irish News dedicated a half page to invest in his excellent performance in promoting jobs last year.
There we go.
And the top half of the page was Arlene Foster announcing something at the Balmoral show.
Excellent stuff.
Thank you very much.
You've done well that day.
They are
The Minister for Self
off the online
Mr.
press.
Mallister would call her.
Right, can we move then to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 5, an oral briefing from the Consumer Council on implementing the Alternative Dispute Resolution Directive and online dispute resolution regulation. So, to remind members and members of the public, this item of business will be covered by Hansard. So,
Can you get some coverage there, big guy?
any electronic, excuse me, gentlemen, any electronic devices should be switched off with the exception of assembly tablets. The papers for this item is on page 47. So, and with us today briefing the committee are Mr. Don Leeson, the Director of Operations at the Consumer Council, and Mr. Aidan O'Donnell, the Interim Chief Executive from the Consumer Council. You're both very welcome indeed. Thanks for coming along to be with us here today. So, do you want to make the opening statement? You know the way it works, up to 10 minutes to make the opening statement. Then we'll have a Q&A session from members, okay?
Okay, well, thanks very much, and thanks to the committee for taking an interest in the alternative dispute resolution proposals. We had provided a submission to the BIS consultation and shared this with yourselves last week, so it's really good to get a chance to speak to you in more detail about the concerns that we have. So just before mentioning the ADR, I do want to place on record just appreciation of the staff and the board and myself for the interest the committee has shown over the last period of time in terms of ministerial review. So I just wanted, when I had that opportunity to say that first of all.
The future is bright then, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. Well, it's a lot more secure. I think the uncertainty's been lifted for a lot of staff, which is really, really welcome and a positive step for us. Good. Thanks for the interest in that. I suppose in terms of the ADR, what we probably have to say is that we've more questions than answers in relation to the proposals and the consultation that was forwarded, which maybe isn't what you want to hear. But certainly the recent consultation by BIS didn't address all the relevant issues, which raises concerns with us as a Consumer Council in terms of how that's going to impact upon both consumers and businesses, and we have equal concern for both in relation to that. In terms of just a brief overview, the Alternative Dispute Resolution Directive requires EU member states to put in place by July next year, so July 2015, a comprehensive framework of alternative dispute resolution services, and that's for dealing with consumer complaints across all markets. So that could be mediation or arbitration. It provides provision for both of them. But I think it's worthy, the whole aim or ethos of ADR is worthy, and that's to resolve issues without having to resort to legal proceedings, and that's obviously to the benefit of the business and the consumer in terms of saving time, hassle, stress and the cost of going down the legal route. I suppose presently, just in relation to the Consumer Council, the way that we handle complaints is really through a mediation route, so we can't really impose a settlement on the business or the consumer, so we try to mediate and reach a mutually agreeable solution for both, and that would probably change under the ADR directive. As I mentioned, in terms of consultation, BIS have completed that last week. It definitely didn't provide enough detail or certainty in terms of the issues that we felt needed to be addressed, and indeed we would say that the proposals are regressive in terms of the current consumer protection framework that's in place. And we also know from talking to other stakeholders and consumer groups that many of them felt that there was not enough detail and too much uncertainty for them to provide a meaningful response. I think that's a worry for us moving forward as well. We do know that BIS intend to engage further regarding Northern Ireland specific issues with the DFP and DETI. And we certainly wish to be involved in those discussions. I'm sure that's something the committee would wish to be involved in, take an interest in as well. We know that whilst Consumer Affairs has devolved, it's currently the intention from the BIS consultation to implement the directive through regulations made under the European Communities Act 1972. But I think given, and we'll touch on some of the high-level significant implications for consumer protection, and the shortcomings and concerns that we have with the proposals, we actually recommend that the directive is considered and implemented locally in Northern Ireland through legislation passed by the Assembly. So we'll touch on some of the high-level concerns, but I just want to set out that we're not at odds with the principles of ADR. We think it's a positive development, it's a positive scheme. It's how the proposals are being brought forward and implemented. We think that if it is done properly and implemented effectively, it can provide benefits to both consumers and businesses, and it could be a quick and inexpensive way of dealing with complaints and resolving them in a way that's satisfactory for both. But that depends on some of the issues that Donald highlighted being effectively addressed.
Okay, good morning. I think the key point is this is a comprehensive directive that's coming in and making ADR provision across the piece. So it touches on all complaints handling bodies as well as ourselves. So it's not just Consumer Council complaints, it's every other ombudsman type organisation that's dealing with consumer complaints. So it is touching on all of those. The aim is that it builds on existing ADR provision, and I think that's the crucial point, is it should be building on and not regressive in nature. And I think my concern is that the proposals put forward by BIS at the moment will go back and repeal some of the strengths of our current system. So just to give you some of the examples of where we think this is a potential threat, both the Energy Order 2003 and the Water and Sewage Services Order require energy and water service providers to engage with the Consumer Council to resolve consumer complaints. The business proposals will make ADR participation voluntary on businesses. We believe it should be mandatory, as it is in those sectors. Otherwise, we know from our research that fewer than 5% of organisations are very likely to actually undertake an ADR process. So it's something that's generally shunned at the moment by businesses unless there's some compulsion in there. Key issue for us also is business-to-business complaints are excluded, and that includes businesses where they're acting as a consumer. So our own legislation makes no distinction between that, but that would be repealed under the proposals as they currently stand. So some of our notable successes in recently, when we got £285,000 returned to Alton Gelvin Hospital, that wouldn't fall under ADR in the future. We're particularly concerned the impact on small and medium enterprises as well, because they don't generally have access or can afford legal support to deal with cases. So that's an issue that we think ought to be addressed as well. And there are other issues as well, like vulnerable consumers, and additional support for vulnerable consumers is excluded and not mentioned within the directive, and our own legislation makes provision for additional support for those. There's also, I think BIS anticipate this being very much a commercial venture and being delivered by private sector providers in large part, and therefore they're looking at minimum thresholds for delivery or for entry into the ADR process. We don't set such a threshold as a complaints handling body, and often we find that consumers come to us looking really just for an apology or to change a policy or a practice from an organisation. They're not necessarily in it looking for compensation. It's also problematic for postal services where generally complaints deal with a very low value issues, so they would be potentially excluded as well. So we're concerned that these issues have not really been addressed. And then there's some other sort of unanswered questions. There's no detail about what type of ADR process will be undertaken, concerns about how independence and impartiality of ADR providers will be protected, particularly where this is a commercial venture. No mention of appeals, no mention of how binding agreements will be enforced. So there's a lot of unanswered questions around that. And then lastly, there's various sort of infrastructure changes that are envisaged by BIS, bringing into parts new bodies such as a competent authority to oversee each ADR providers. And BIS proposals at the moment envisage a competent authority for each sector. So an organisation such as the Consumer Council could find ourselves reporting to several different competent authorities, all with their own different quality standards and so on. So there's problems around that. Our view is that could be implemented much more simply in Northern Ireland with a single competent authority just looking across the piece at all of the standards. Also, there's recommendations for a single complaints help desk and ODR contact points. All of these are already mechanisms in place to sort of handle those rather than inventing new bodies. So those are some of the sort of just a flavour of some of the concerns that we've set out in our consultation document. And I'll hand back to Aidan.
Yeah, the consultation and the paper we provided sets those out. We're in a tight timescale because it's July 2015 is when this has to be implemented, and we know that provides a lot of pressure in terms of getting the solutions in place. But our position is, from the proposals that BIS have put forward, they actually don't cater effectively or sufficiently enough for the situation that consumers and businesses find themselves here. And we think that's where it requires a local focus in terms of trying to find a solution that really works for people here. There is time to start addressing that, but I suppose the clock is ticking is what we're flagging up to the committee, that July will be quick coming round.
Just a couple of quick points. You mentioned there where the business versus business, where in effect the business is the consumer.
Yeah.
There's no reason why a business shouldn't be a consumer if it's buying a product or a service.
We believe that should be the case. That's not BIS's view at the moment.
Really?
Yeah.
I think, for example, they would deem that a business consumer, a business using, for example, water and energy, we wouldn't be able to take that complaint or inquiry through if these proposals went forward. And if you look at where we sit in water, for example, at the moment, it really is non-domestic complaints and inquiries is the main. There's obviously customer service issues, but when it comes down to meter bills and meter reads and things like that, it is the business that we support.
So that would rule out a farmer.
Yep.
Coming to you, farmer who has domestic supply but is metered to serve the rest of the farm, because that farmer would be interpreted as being a business then.
Yeah.
Or it would require a separate process. So ADR stuff, and that wouldn't make sense.
If you could just talk me through, I picked up on some stuff there about an appeals mechanism. You're talking about, obviously, in a situation where mediation fails, an appeals mechanism after that. Talk me through how you would envisage that, to your mind, the way it should operate?
Yeah,
Please.
well, normally, because it's particularly around arbitration, so it's where mediation has not succeeded in trying to get a joint agreement, and then somebody's then had to take a decision as
Yes.
to whether who's right and who's wrong, whether it's the business or the consumer is in the right. Normally, in most arbitration systems, for example, in the employment field, there's an appeal mechanism, so there's a safety valve if you're not. I suppose with ADR, it's meant to be final and binding, and that should be the end of the process. But there's always a safety valve needed for where there's something highly irregular has happened, and people got very concerned about the process that's gone through. So there needs to be that sort of, essentially a safety valve, so there is some sort
Right,
of
maybe I have a
safety
different
net.
concept to this. This alternative dispute resolution.
Yeah.
I was of a mind that people come into a room and would agree.
Sorry?
Would agree. People come into a room
Yeah.
and would agree without having to go recourse back to courts or whatever.
Yes, and that's how it should be in 99% of the cases.
Yes.
But there always needs to be provision for those cases where the arbitrator, who's the person taking the decision, is somehow there's some suspicions about the way they've acted. They've reached a very highly irregular decision, and that
So
needs
it's a binding decision.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying, right? Okay. Thanks for that. Yes, Mr. McKinney, Fergal.
Thank you, Chair. I'll not get into the arguments for, although on the face of it, there does appear to be that there's some room for saying that things should be different here. But given that it's a consultation, what's the potential for you to influence it sufficient to meet our needs at that level?
I think that's what we're trying to. We have been working on for the last year. These proposals have been worked through, and we've engaged with BIS. I think we do know since the consultation has been completed that BIS have said that they recognise that there's some issues within devolved nations as well that may need specific approaches, and they've committed to engaging with that, both with the department and DFP. I think as long as we're involved in those discussions, I think we can bring some influence. I think there's a long way to go in terms of making these proposals as they sit within the BIS consultation satisfactory, both for business and both for consumers. It has to work for both, and it has to provide adequate protection for both. So I think the worry is that there's such a short timescale. The proposal to take it through existing legislation, the Act 72, might not give enough opportunity to scrutinise the proposals, I think would be the concern.
I'm picking up on one comment you made in your last sentence there. Are you being sufficiently listened to? Are you in the process, other than as a consultee?
Well, we have been involved in the process. I don't think there has been enough local engagement on the issue. It has been taken from a national perspective at the moment from BIS. I think they're only starting to get into a series of motions of actually looking what is the impact of this on devolved assemblies and local markets. And if we can get involved in those discussions, we can be very clear and put forward where we have concerns. Whether those have been fully considered, we can't answer at this stage until we have those discussions, I suppose.
But you are proposing a bespoke legislative model. Is that different from the process that you're engaged with now in terms of the consultation and the BIS process?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, because there are two aspects. We're concerned about the lack of visibility of this directive coming in, where there's very few bodies within Northern Ireland seem to be aware of this coming in. Certainly, speaking to industry, they're not aware of this coming in. So I think by having this on the agenda, I think hopefully this discussion will actually help that. I think in terms of what type of legislation it should be, I think if it comes through from regulations from BIS, then it will be a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think obviously we've got a different, our regulated markets here are different from they are in Great Britain. The makeup of our economy in terms of preponderance of small and medium enterprises is different, and I think and I think some of the protections we have in could be at risk of being rolled away if we take that one-size-fits-all approach.
And what would the scale of work be involved in bespoke legislation, both in time scale and extent?
Yeah, I don't think. Personally, I don't think the extent is a particular burden. I think timescale is a problem. I think there's a year to go, and I think the chance of getting primary legislation through would be pretty tough, I would have thought. So we're probably looking at some kind of pragmatic solution with a view to further change down the line.
Yeah, and could that happen beyond the deadline for this? If for example, you weren't to win your arguments could those arguments be won at a later stage by amendment or legislation as you propose?
I think that would be the pragmatic solution, yeah. I think we'll hope if we can protect the protections we have at the moment and we don't lose those in the current approach, then I think that's a great start, and then we can look at refining that to meet our own needs later on.
But in the meantime, you're pulling the cord, if you like, or signalling the alarm, saying there are issues here that need to be resolved either at a BIS level or a local legislative level.
We've had discussions, I think, just with a range of stakeholders, and there were some that didn't reply to this because they didn't feel that the consultation gave enough detail. I had spoken to some business sector organisations yesterday that weren't aware of this either, and we're worried for because there's going to be a cost potentially to this for the businesses to operate, but also the business-to-business consumer issue is one that should be flagged up. So you're right, visibility around this and actually getting some sharing on what the proposals are and what the impact is for Northern Ireland is really what.
Are you satisfied or not that the Enterprise Department is fully engaged with your concerns?
We've copied across our consultation responses, we've engaged, and we are going to be meeting with them specific on this issue, I think this week on Friday as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Mr. Flanagan. Phil.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for the presentation at short notice. What's the logic behind this change? Without asking you to speak for Biz.
Well, I think the logic is probably worthy enough. As I said, it is trying to provide a mechanism that allows people to have recourse to handle their complaints and business to handle their complaints without having to go to legal proceedings. That's the whole premise of it, and I don't think we would argue with that, because if you can find an approach that allows business and consumers to resolve complaints the satisfactory way without going to the legal route is better. But if you take that as the high level premise and what was the directive was trying to intend to achieve, I think it's shifted the consultation and where we're trying isn't really achieving that, because it leaves too much uncertainty of how that actually could be delivered. I think it's probably fair, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And does it remove the right from people to go to the court to seek redress if the ADR doesn't work out?
Yeah, I think you have a choice. You can go down the formal legal route, or you can go to.
Can you go down both?
Disputes. No.
Can't do both.
And what's the chances that following the consultation response that Biz might relook at that again, or is that the whole purpose of the changes they're making?
Well, it has to be, it's a EU directive, so it has to be brought in. So it's a question of how much they bring it in. If at the moment the proposal is a very de minimis approach, this is the minimum possible approach that they can bring in. I think what they...
Sorry, just don't interrupt you. The European directive, is that about enhancing consumer rights, or is it about reducing access to the courts?
Essentially, first and foremost, it's about a more effective way of consumers exerting their rights and getting complaints heard and getting them resolved quickly.
And what does the directive state about this? Does it specifically state that if you go down the route of alternative dispute resolution, you then can't go to court?
I think it does, yeah. I mean, that's normally the approach of the ADR. It is an alternative, but it is a sort of fork in the road. You have to decide which route you wish to pursue. You can't back both horses, if you like. Okay,
and so if somebody engages with ADR, with somebody they have a problem with, what's to stop the person that's in the wrong just saying, no, I'm not engaging with you, I'm not participating, I'm in the right and you're in the wrong, and you're getting nothing, and then that's that person not getting redress?
Yeah, well, that's part of the if they go down the ADR and commit to using ADR, then that's one of the issues that BIS is silent on, is how do they then enforce the agreement or the decision that's made under ADR. There's no mention of that in the consultation document, so that's one of the concerns we've flagged up.
But is the ADR process, will it be presided over by an independent panel or a body that will make a determination, or is it up to the two parties to come to an agreed settlement?
There's two aspects to ADR. One is mediation, which is the facilitated sort of discussion and where they hopefully come to a negotiated agreement. If that fails, then it can go into arbitration, where an independent person will then take a decision as to who's right and who's wrong and make an award on the outcome of that.
There's a lot of issues that you're raising there around how the scheme will work. There's issues around who will be an ADR provider. There's areas of the markets where there is none of that, and they're talking about a residual ADR provider. Then there's issues around competent authority and who signs off and who can. Okay. These are issues that are touched upon in the consultation, but we can't. We're flagging up. We said at the start with more questions and answers. Those are the kind of questions we've been flagging up because there isn't enough detail to be confident that the proposals that are being put forward are satisfactory. and that's the big concern, is that if we go with this with scant detail and limited discussion or engagement, then we could get solutions that aren't really right for us.
And in terms of legislation like the Energy Order 2003, which gives consumers particular rights, is it specifically stated in the consultation that that will now be undermined or will become irrelevant?
No, it's an unforeseen consequence. Speaking to Biz, they hadn't realised that when we spoke to them, this was one of the things they hadn't been flagged up to them before. So we don't know how much contact DETI, for example, has had with Biz around over this.
And are Biz proposing to legislate for us on this, or is it a fact of consumer rights as a devolved matter, so you can do whatever you want?
Well, it's at the moment the proposals are that Biz will legislate, and that it requires that vehicle simply requires executive agreement to allow those regulations to be made.
And do you have a vision as to what alternative system we would bring in as opposed to what Biz is proposing here?
Yeah, I mean, we set out in our document, I mean, some of the key things, essentially addressing what we have at the moment and keeping what we have at the moment, but extending that out to other industry sectors. So, allowing businesses as consumers, for example, to take part in the process, making it mandatory for businesses to take part in the process if the consumer wishes to use this route to resolve their complaint.
And as part of that process, could we also include given your organisation the power to carry out investigations?
Well, we have that already at the moment with water.
But only into regulated industries?
Yeah.
Into other sectors and into
we're not. That's not on our agenda at all. We just want to keep what we have at the moment in terms of those particular industry sectors, and don't want to.
And did any other representative bodies from the north respond, the likes of the CAB or Housing Rights or any of them outfits?
Not that I'm aware. I know there was organisations that haven't responded. We have raised this with a number of stakeholders, and I would say in most cases they had been unaware that this was coming through, which is a concern that it has been quite a silent sort of development or proposal that's been put forward. I guess the one thing we want from this committee session is just to raise it on the agenda, and at least we know we can start to address some of the issues if we're working on it for the next year. But we were quite concerned that both consumer organisations, business organisations, and indeed some regulators hadn't been aware that this was coming through.
Well, the utility regulator was a consultee, but I think this evidence session demonstrates the need for the Consumer Council to be retained as a statutory consultee on all government legislation. And I think it's very important that that's retained along with the Consumer Council. That's it.
Okay. Just one thing. I want to get it kind of clear in my head, even if it's clear about the nebulous nature of what the proposals are. So, somebody goes to mediation. Usually these things are about money, about a bill, about the extent of a bill, or a disagreement around that. The arbiter decides, right, I adjudicate in favour of X or Y, or it might be a combination of making a determination himself or herself. Now, say somebody says, get away with you. I don't agree with that. That 1% or 2% of cases where that might happen, we're not going with that. Who then should be responsible for the enforceability of that, for making sure that's enforced?
Well, that's one of the questions we've asked. It's not mentioned in the consultation document, but it needs to underpin this. We know, for example, in the employment law field, where arbitration and mediation is used extensively, and there's some carryover from there, is that the Enforcement of Judgments Office will enforce those agreements. So you would imagine some sort of similar mechanism to that. Yeah.
Then, just leading on from this, and I'm looking at the process ourselves to inform ourselves best on this, because quite clearly there are a number of concerning issues coming up already, not least of all the fact that there isn't clarity around what the process should be. Should the Assembly or should the Department wish to make changes to this, if the Executive says, sorry, we're not adopting this, then it's over to the Department to start to make changes to it itself. Yep, that's okay, because that will inform ourselves as to where we take it from here. So then, a final point, the consultation exercise itself, now we can establish this, find out, well, how was that done, or how extensively was it consulted upon, do you know? So you don't know, it doesn't matter, but I need that idea.
I mean, we've made it our business to keep informed and keep tabs of this directive because we knew it was coming in. So we've kept in touch with BIS, but our sense is very few other bodies have done the same. I think it has come with a surprise, and the quite important bodies that we've spoken to have had no sight of this at all. Weren't even aware of the directive, let alone the implications for that.
Okay, perhaps if members are agreed, we should establish from the department the level of consultation that they're aware of being done on this. So. Okay. Next we have Mr. McLaughlin. Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. Some of it has already been touched on. So just fairly briefly, in terms of the experience here of, the alternative dispute resolution, it's actually applied in the construction industry, isn't it? In terms of resolving disputes between contractors, subcontractors, etc. And what is the experience?
In the construction industry, we would have very limited experience of how that works. I suppose where we would have a bit more is on the financial ombudsman service and those services, and they work. They'd be the most well-known, probably, provider of those services, and it works.
The construction one is relatively new. That's why I was interested.
I suppose in terms of our areas of work, we haven't really had much engagement with them, but our knowledge of how that is being implemented.
I mean, the positive, and I suppose it is a positive, is that you unclog the legal system, you avoid unnecessary delays, particularly in terms of public works contracts, etc., etc. So there'll be plenty of reasons, motivational reasons, why people might think this is a good idea. Experience and being able to refer to experience is very important here, where maybe it's not as it's not the positive that it may be getting presented in every circumstance. Is it a case that maybe whoever is paying the piper has an advantage?
But there's obviously an issue around that in terms of how the schemes are funded, and especially if they're commercial enterprises as well. But the experience of the ADR, it's a European directive, and I think there's different levels of use and knowledge and experience of ADR schemes across different European countries. Some are more common than others. And for us here, we totally support the principle that a positive ADR scheme could unclog the courts. That would be the right thing, and it's also a quicker and more timely and effective way to get consumer satisfaction and business satisfaction. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's making sure that that vision is translated into actually the right scheme and the right mechanism for doing it is a bit that we have concerns with, and the kind of the one-size-fits-all approach that's being adopted by BIS, I think, doesn't take account of local markets or own devolved consumer policy and the implications.
Well, you see the kind of the steps from the alternative dispute resolution is to an extent a voluntary process where people just agree to come to discuss the problem, see if they can work something out. It then moves on to an arbitration process. Now, as I understand it, and it's the reason for my question in relation to the construction industry, is that unless both parties accept there and then the arbitration outcome, then in fact there's no prejudice to their right to access the legal process. Are you saying that's going to be changed under this legislation?
We're saying we don't know. We don't know. It's silent on that at the moment. But that is an approach. But it depends on different industries and different businesses use different approaches. So, I mean, in the employment law field, arbitration is binding, whereas but it's not clear what. There is no mention.
Yeah, just clarify. Just repeat that for me again. Then, so under this draft order, the arbitration outcome would be binding, irrespective of whether you signed up for it or not. A decision is made.
Well, that's why you sign up for it. If you sign up for it, then you sign up to it.
Yeah, but the arbitration process that they're experimenting with, possibly that's just to be fair in terms of the construction industry, is that arbitration is the two parties get together. If it's impossible, which it might well be, as you can imagine, for them to resolve it, then a third party is introduced as a facilitator, as a mediator, not necessarily someone who hands down a decision and says you won and you lost. That's just you're facilitating a resolution that eluded the two parties. And presumably that's the type of model of arbitration that you would think about, or maybe even the role that you yourselves play at times.
That's what we practice at the moment in energy, water, transport, and those fields, and that sort of mediated outcome is what we work on at the moment. If arbitration comes in, that would give us an additional responsibility for actually taking a decision if that mediation didn't succeed in getting it.
Yeah, but I suppose it's the difference between a decision and a recommendation.
Yes, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless any other members have anything further to add. Thanks very much for drawing that to our attention. It's very important stuff in the process and how we do that. Now, in terms of the committee itself, I think it would be appropriate that we have the officials along from the department
Good idea.
to discuss this. And obviously this session has been Hansarded, so in advance of their attending, and so that they know some of the issues that have come up, that the Hansard be provided to the department as well. So we agreed in that course of action.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
But we also need to ask the Minister not to bring any papers to the Executive on this matter until the committee has had appropriate chance to scrutinise it.
I would hope, given the consultation exercise, I would be hoping that the consultation exercise would be coming back. The results of the consultation would
But
be
it's
coming
not
back
the
to us.
department doing it, it's Biz. We weren't told the initial consultation was happening. You know what I mean?
True. Fair point. So our members agreed we flag up the urgency of the situation to the department, to the Minister as well then? Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. That's grand. Thanks very much. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Okay.
It is very well.
Now we move on to other further matters arising, and they run from page 126 onwards. Page 127, we have the response from the Department and how information received by the Department from European liaison officers can best be passed to the committee. I think, well, it's at least welcome that people are starting to think about a more coordinated communication approach. They maybe should have thought of that before they set up these positions about two odd years ago. Yeah. However, as to how the Executive Office in Brussels interacts with and informs Assembly members and the committee identification for considerable improvement in this area, somebody has obviously woken up to the need to do this, you know. So, can we forward this to other statutory committees for their information, please?
Great.
Now, at page 128, it's not an unrelated matter, is a response from OFMD-FM to our request for an update on the communication strategy they have in place to ensure the dissemination of information from Brussels to the committee, as well as businesses and the wider public. Now, I think what the letter flags up is there isn't an information strategy, and that it's open to individual departments to independently brief their committees on it, if you see in that second paragraph, on advice received from the office in Brussels relevant to their sectoral responsibilities. That really hasn't been done by the department on any sort of a regular basis. So would members be agreed that we contact the department to ask them, one, what they're doing to ensure that there's a strategic approach to communications, and two, if or in what manner they're going to inform the committee. Give us an update, agreed?
Yeah, Chair, yeah, I think most of us have been out there and seen the organisation, the resources that are being used and utilised, and yet we get very little feedback directly about what is going on.
You literally have to go chasing it.
Yes.
Which
I think it's most disappointing, really. You know, they should be liaising more directly with the executive through the committee system of what is going on in the various departments. But I know you've tried on a number of occasions, and I think it's still somewhat disappointing, the lack of information that's coming back to us.
Okay.
And if we don't know, how does other organisations, manufacturers and so on, and other agencies that are trying to draw down resources, for example, how are they communicating with them?
We're missing a trick.
Absolutely.
That's it. You know, as a result of this. So, if members are agreed with that course of action, thank you. R&D Horizon 2020 presentation by Invest NI, that's at page 130, and they are content, Invest NI, to answer any further questions that we might have. So, if members are content to write to Invest NIO, NI Chief Executive and thank him and his staff for their for arranging the visit.
No, the lack of it. Chair,
Was there
just
none?
on that, I thought it was a useful exercise, but I expected more, I think.
You're underwhelmed, are you?
What's that?
Underwhelmed?
Yes.
Aye.
Yeah, I expected more. It didn't really work very well. I thought the whole.
Well, actually, I was reflecting on, and obviously I had another event here, as a number of us had, Stephen and Phil and myself. But I was sorely tempted to ring in someday myself as a business person and test the system.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it was a bit.
But I'm sure they do sample calls that could give you a listen to for training and something other purpose.
Aye.
Yeah,
Sure, they're all recorded.
they did
Like, you can
offer
ask
to-
for a sample of calls.
Yeah, they offered to do that when we were there.
But
I think generally, Chairman, I was somewhat disappointed about the way the whole thing was communicated by Invest. I thought it wasn't very well organised, didn't flow very well, and I thought we didn't get the best out of it. And the lunch was poor, as already has been mentioned.
Lunch? Was there any?
Chair,
Yes.
I had to leave anyway, but I didn't leave early because I went by what we'd agreed, what time, and I left it was about 12 or so.
Yeah.
But for me, it was obvious I was going to go on for another hour and a half or so. So it's, you know, either the tell us are going to be finishing at 1:30 or 2, rather than put pressure on people who've organised other things, and I had to get away anyway. But I thought when they went on a bit as well too. So I found it. I was a bit disappointed. A wee bit.
I don't know how we get to terms with just really what is available, because whenever you're going down there, you're listening to what's been told to you, as opposed to what might be told to a business person that is making inquiries around it. I've no doubt there's some good people in there that are doing their job and doing it well, but I'm not sure how we penetrate that a wee bit further. Because you get, invariably any organisation would do it, and we're guilty of it ourselves, you get the spin. So I think we reflect on that, and if it's worthwhile maybe going down for one specific event just to sit there with them and talk them through, because I found it very, very difficult to even hear what has been said.
Yeah.
And that there was phones ringing here and there and everywhere, and they obviously, nobody had taken into consideration. They were more anxious in showing us that the phones were ringing rather than explaining. And that's with the best will in the world to the people that were trying to do the job of explaining it to us. It did seem a bit kind of piecemeal.
Sure. I don't know about you, but whenever you're first in MLA and you don't have the contacts in InvestNI, then when a business comes to you and you contact InvestNI, well, that's where I ended up, at the desk. You know, so maybe that's what individuals need to do, because, you know, I've certainly signposted to the right place whenever I contacted them as an individual, but, you know, maybe that's something that MLAs want to just test.
Enterprise Ireland very helpful.
Aye, well,
But anyway,
worthwhile. I think maybe if they thought that, see our good friend down at the back there, if they thought that there was going to be a few anonymous MLAs ringing in to find out how they were going to be signposted, we could see an even better improvement in operations. So
I'll be honest with you, Paz, I don't think we need to micromanage at that level.
Yeah.
I think Invest and I staff in the call centre are doing a good job. What I'm hearing from businesses is that they're doing a good job, and I don't think we need to get into listening to individual phone calls to see how it's going. I don't think we need to understand it at that level. I genuinely don't. I think that's far too much level of detail for a scrutiny committee. You know, if you're going to do it for Invest and ID, then do it for the Tourist Board, the Consumer Council, the Health and Safety Executive. It's not something that we can practically do.
wasn't suggesting that we did. It was based on our visit down there. The reason we had gone down there was to find out if in fact the range of information that is required of businesses, be it Horizon 2020, be it the Green Investment Bank, be it those others, that there was a signpost in operation in place for those, and that staff were sufficiently well informed, as I would expect them to be, whenever someone does ring in, and that could be a person that we have signposted them to ring up InvestNI, that they're getting the full detail that they need to get to avail of the opportunities for their business. That was my only concern, not micromanaging. No, just to make sure that people are fully up to speed. So, anyway, we'll reflect on that. And on that, can we move to the next item, which
just Patsy, that was the R&D liaison service. Can we go back to the Department or Invest and I and ask them what emphasis is placed on building cross-border initiatives with the aim of enhancing the local economy, and how they work with their counterparts in the south to maximise the drawdown of European funds through R&D programmes. And then can we get a breakdown on the level of uptake from each of the different areas to see if there's a greater level of uptake along the border because of that easier geographical link.
Uptake of what, Phil? Uptake
of European
R&D
funding
funds?
and drawing down grant.
Are you talking about the R&D, the Horizon 2020, or EU funds in general?
Not all. It'll be R&D.
R&D.
But it's to see whether there's a higher proliferation of drawdown along the border corridor because of the easier access to partners in another member state, if you know what I mean.
Aye. Well, I'm wondering just would that be something for Intertrade as well? Well, anyway, if we pop it over to the department, they can provide us with that information.
Just on that, Chair, there's some challenges to do with promoting Northern Ireland businesses or businesses advancing. That maybe that relationship between the Republic of Ireland conflicts, because if they're looking after their own interests, obviously as well. So maybe ask them if there are any barriers of policy definitions. That would mean that that there needs to be resolutions found.
And maybe a written update from the working group that was set up to complement one another, both sides, on an all-island working group, to work on that very thing, the drawdown of EU funding.
But the group was here one day?
Aye. Because I was a wee bit concerned from listening to the lady at Invest NI about the number of applications that were in, and I was sort of saying to myself, after all our inquiries into Horizon 2020 and previously FP7, you had by this stage been anticipating a wee bit more enthusiasm about getting applications in. Now, it's not all entirely their fault if people don't want to do it, but I would have thought at least the tantalizer would have been there to do.
Exactly, sorry, Chair, but that is a good point. She made that point, in fact, that there were a lot of applications came but weren't relevant. So what sort of information had been given out to them? What sort of training has there been? What awareness?
Yes.
And this is all this talk. We've been talking about this now since I came in here 3 years ago. And, and now we hear that a lot of the applications that come in are not relevant.
Yes. I
do worry, are we going to make any really great improvement under 2020 than we did under Framework 7? I really do. And we should be making big improvements.
Yes.
But listening to that last week, I really do worry about it.
Can we then, so we're really looking for an update on progress being made. Phil had made a point about some of the border counties, and if they were, if you like,
was it a bias towards them? Is that what you're worried about?
No, I just want to see whether there's a high level of uptake from border business because of an easier geographical link to partners.
If there was
you need
a higher level
from member states.
Are you talking about a higher level of uptake than the others, and then leading on from that, what we're seeking to establish is an update on the workings of the cross-border working group on Horizon 2020 and various other R&D projects, just basically what their update is on the level of progress that they're making.
Just on that point, Chair, it might not necessarily be that it's a geographical connection, if you know what I mean, about where you're located. It's a knowledge connection. So, for example, Queen's with, say, Cork business or wherever it happens to be. So it's a knowledge connection. It won't necessarily find itself merely because a business is located somewhere, that somehow or other there's a link across the border. That's,
as well as that,
it's a deeper cross-border connection, really is.
There's been quite a considerable level of investment in the officers in the respective institutes such as Queen's, UU and AFBI as well. So it'd be interesting to hear just what's been generated as a result of that too. So, okay, we agreed to pursue that.
Great.
Thank you. Next item, Invest NI end of year outturn figures. Tabled today is a response from Invest NI to the committee queries regarding the timeliness of papers and letters of offer.
Couldn't get it in time for the action on it.
Minister had it. So, okay, content to note.
Where is this, Patsy? Sorry.
That's tabled.
What about?
Your table papers.
On the table?
That's the second item in on your table of papers there. Dated the 17th of June. Sorry, that's the credit union stuff. That's the one after that. Delay in the ministerial approval. So, okay. Next item is Credit Union and Industrial and Provident Societies Bill. Tabled as a response from the Department to the Committee's pre-legislative scrutiny of the Credit Unions and Industrial Provident Societies Bill. The response states that 2 of the Committee's 3 recommendations have been accepted and the third one is still under consideration. This is the second item. That's the one dated the 17th of June in the table of papers today. So that's some good progress. Happy enough to forward this along to the Irish League of Credit Unions and the Ulster Federation. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, and content to consider the response again during the committee stage of the bill. Okay, agreed? Right, okay. And just to remind members that the committee had previously received correspondence from a member of the public who had experienced a delay in the department responding to information in regards to the Presbyterian Mutual Society. This was by way of an FOI request. And the committee had asked the department why there was a delay in providing the information and that it be copied into the response that the member of public received. I received correspondence on this matter from the member of the public in which he states he has now received a response from the department and that's tabled for members' information today. The committee hasn't yet received any correspondence from the department in the matter, so for today, if we're happy enough to note that.
Where is it in the table of papers, Patsy?
That's
Not in either matters arising or the correspondence.
in your second batch, where it should be anyway.
No.
Not no.
No. Noted.
Well, we can get it emailed out to members. Okay.
Is there anything else? No.
It's just
a
an
letter
update.
saying he got it.
Well, you need a bit of detail with it, so we'll get it emailed around members.
The blend of it something. Anything we can criticise the department for it.
Right.
And you can go.
Next item we've got is a written briefing from DETI on the economic impact of the review of business red tape. So that's at page 140. And the committee had requested last week's meeting, I think Phil, you had asked about this, an update from the department, what was being done on making cross-border trade easier with regards to business red tape and the better regulation strategy. So we have that with us here today, and apparently they're working on a pilot approach to, the review team is piloting an approach with construction, agri-food and hospitality. And says here at the bottom there, the Minister intends to meet with the advisory panel review team before finalising their report to discuss their findings and outcome in more detail. So, if members are content to receive an oral briefing on the review outcomes once that report has been published.
But I take it that, given that we raised this last Thursday and this letter from the Ministers last Friday, I presume the committee hadn't got it to the department in time for inclusion, because there's no reference within this letter or the briefing about
I think the two
cross-border stuff.
pass one another.
Aye.
Yeah, no, that's still an outstanding matter.
I would hope there.
Aye. Okay. Now, next item is at page 144. That's in regard to proposals for UK-wide REACH Enforcement Amendment Regulation 2014, as is referred to. We have papers there for the registration, evaluation, authorisation and restrictions of chemicals. And DOE is the lead department for REACH. However, regulations are enforced by DOE, DETI and local councils. The Health and Safety Executive NI has therefore a role. So, unless members have any comments about this, we're content to note it.
Right.
Agenda item number 9, which is on page 155, is a consultation on the strategic framework to tackle economic inactivity. And the papers for this item are at 155. Committee for Employment and Learning received an oral briefing on the consultation on the 28th of May, and the Hansard transcript of the evidence session has been tabled. So, unless members have any comments around this, to note.
Right.
Great. Now, we move on then to agenda item number 10, which is correspondence, and that runs from page 208 onwards. So, Jim, do you want to take us through correspondence, please?
So the first item is from the Minister informing the Committee of the transfer of UK National Competent Authority tasks for energy projects from the Department of Energy and Climate Change to DETI.
That's in your tabled papers.
Within the terms of the EU 10E regulation. That's tabled today.
What page is it, sir?
Here, tabled documentation, that's the first item on the table there, Gordon. That's a letter dated the 17th of June.
Oh, aye.
There's for information, so members are content to note that.
Agreed.
From New Century regarding the restriction of coal sales to households is tabled today. There's something the Deputy Chair brought to the committee. So it's something that it seems it's something that it would be the Department of the Environment would be in the lead. So if members are content to suggest to the individual that they contact the Department of the Environment.
I understand it is an issue sitting under DOE. I've been contacted by some other coal suppliers about it, and there are real concerns about this. I think you're aware of it as well, Chairman. And it will have a significant impact on fuel poverty within Northern Ireland if this is implemented. So I think it's important that it is totally scrutinised, any changes that are proposed. So,
okay.
Well, Patsy, can we pass it over to the Environment Committee and see if they're interested in dealing with it? And if they're not, can we then come back to it and see whether members have an interest here in looking at it?
That's grand. Okay, agreed.
Great, yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, Jim.
Keep it.
And final piece of correspondence from the Clerk of the Committee for Regional Development to the Department, thanking the officials who presented the Committee on the 11th of June on the inquiry into benefits to cycling to economy. That's page 209.
Okay.
That's just really to note.
Note it.
Great. Okay, and at agenda item number 11 is the forward work programme. That's at page 212 is the draft committee work programme for 2014-15, and table today is a list of matters. I think you have them there, Jim, on the outstanding matters which are currently with the department. Okay. So, for the moment, content to note.
Right, when's the inquiry expected to be finished, Jim? Not rushing you or anything?
Well, the last evidence session, obviously the utility regulator has had to be postponed and is coming on the 3rd of July. So that'll be the last evidence session. So the committee won't consider it again really until the middle of September. Now, it was hoped that it would be finished sort of mid-October, so it could possibly be later than that by the time we get.
So, but we've no more evidence sessions to take, you don't think?
Not following the utility regulator unless members have any other evidence sessions.
Are you satisfied with enough case studies to give us an indication as to what the situation on the ground is?
Well, a number of case studies have come, for example, from the likes of Invest NI and I think Manufacturing NI have brought some as well. But from the individuals contacted by members, I think there are only 2. Is that right at this stage? But it does seem that
same story.
The evidence is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, would it be? I think it'd probably be a good idea if we could have an update on the Agri-Food Strategy Board or from them as to progress. You know, it's 13 months since the paper was written. The Enterprise Minister tells us that there is some progress within her department, even though it hasn't been a great executive level. But wouldn't it be good if we could hear from the board?
Yep.
Yeah, get an update from
Hopefully
them.
by that stage it'll be agreed. Certainly agreed to do that, yep.
So can I just caution members too that there's a lot of oral briefings there to be scheduled and then oral briefings to be considered. The committee is going to have to meet at some stage to decide which of these to take and which not to take. There are also 4 items of primary legislation between now and the end of the mandate. 2 of them were supposed to be coming before the end of June, so presumably they'll be coming in the early autumn. So, you know, I think there's a need to be careful about scheduling oral briefings and suggesting people that will try and fit them in, because you know, it will create difficulties in the future, and people who have been told that they'll come will then have to be told to put off, you know.
Chair, because I was going to add to this as well, and that I might have mentioned this before, but I think it'd be good if we maybe just had a meeting down in the Titanic Belfast, and also maybe a visit to the Titanic Studios in terms of all the creative industries. But going back to Jim's point, I mean, I was there recently, and it do your heart a world of good, you know, and it's a growing industry, big time.
Can you meet in the studios as opposed to going to Titanic Belfast?
We could actually, I'm actually a trustee of the Titanic Foundation, so we could maybe host some, get them to host us. And
Somebody was there when they built it.
Down there.
The ship?
But get back to Jim's point, I think we should try and maybe take a day away. I don't know, I could maybe do it at...
Well, to San Diego, is that enough for them?
I know you're going to a week.
Right.
But because there's so much, you know, on our plate here for the future, I need to try and prioritise.
Yes. Right.
Can I suggest at this stage, Chair, that the oral briefings to be considered, it's maybe worth looking at those and highlighting any that the committee does want to schedule for.
Yeah. We'll take a bit of time and go through that then.
Chair, just 11 September.
There's only 5 there.
He's here.
What's on 11 September?
That's the
Oh,
plan.
yes.
We have a plan in there.
Chair, just 11 September. Is that our first day back to work? 11 September, that's a Thursday.
It is.
Is that going to be our planning meeting?
Oh, aye.
That'll be instead of the committee then? Is that the plan?
Yeah, is that members content to have a planning meeting on the first meeting back rather than?
John, do it in Titanic. What?
Well, good.
Means you wouldn't have to make up anything. Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Ready to be done.
And combine it with a visit?
Yep. Good idea. Right, we'll go with
Not
that then.
Titanic Belfast now, whatever else, Titanic Studios.
Okay, agreed to do
Titanic
that.
Belfast before.
That's okay.
The other point on the visits, Chair, I think, you know, visits to businesses, I think, are critical. And
We're not going back to Bangor. Lunch there was worse than the best than I was.
Well, Denver was very good.
so, you know, I think we should try and encourage to other constituencies. North Down, we can certainly organise one again.
Oh, we've already been there.
But other constituencies, I think it's important that we get out
Right,
and
for
about.
members.
See what's happening in the real world rather than sitting up here.
And I know the Northern Ireland Hotels Federation people are very anxious to see us as well, so
Yeah, I think that'd be important.
that'll be important that we do that.
And just on that, Chair, I mean, I know that yesterday the
Those are good to
health
get a
committee
lunch.
we visited at the cancer centre.
Yes.
But of course, this San Diego trip is about you know, biotechnology and all the rest of it. So in many ways, yesterday's trip was as much about jobs and growing the economy as it was about the health aspects of what it. So I maybe put a bit in for the enterprise committee too, to think about, you know, the jobs aspect outside of Belfast.
You should have invited us yesterday then.
It's a joint committee.
Yeah.
Would have been an idea.
No.
I bring back good news to you.
I'll bring it back.
Right.
Don't ask us to go twice.
So we get the general thrust of things now. On the outstanding queries and the outstanding correspondence, are we happy enough to ask the Department to provide responses to all due and outstanding queries by Friday the 27th in time for our final meeting of this session on the 3rd of July? Agreed? Great. Thank you. Right. Any other items of business?
Actually, can I just still on the forward work programme, and I see Jim is flustered looking. Can I request written briefings? Jim, you happy enough with written briefings? Will that give you too much bother? Can we get a written briefing from both the Consumer Council and Manufacturing NI on their impact, the impact I think it'll have on domestic and large energy users, on the cancellation of the generation agreement units? Cancellation of the historic contracts that are agreed with the power stations, because we've been told that it's going to have a serious impact on the prices people pay, and
yes,
what we've been told is the regulator's doing it very quietly and they haven't really publicly consulted. So we begin to hear from the Consumer Council and Manufacturing NI as to their thoughts on it.
Also a matter for the regulator whenever she comes up before us too.
But we begin to hear from people, representative bodies, before we go and address it with the
That's
regulator.
grand, so that we're well informed.
Yeah.
Chairman, just one other issue just came to mind there. Reference to Phoenix Gas, where gas exists within the network, within the Greater Belfast area. If people need, say, an extension of that gas, recently the legislation has been changed, and as a result, anyone require an extension, if say a leg has to be extended into a development, that has now to be paid for by the consumer. This seems to be some change that has been brought out by the utility regulator. Could we get some clarification on that, please?
Okay.
One, I've had examples within the constituency where residents want gas and are able to get it in their development because it now has to be paid for. So residents now can get together and fund that, which to me is in many cases not cost effective. And before this recent change, they virtually put the gas in free. You know, they've done the installation to the door free.
Did the rest.
And then it was up to the house owner to obviously to fit the heating system.
Is it costing about 2,500 or is it far more?
In some cases it's more. It
Supposed to be
depends.
shared, depends on how many people's going to connect.
It depends the length of the run.
You're asking clarification from
Phoenix Gas.
From Phoenix Gas in the
Yes.
first instance.
Yeah.
Right.
And the recent change to the regulations really
Okay.
on gas extensions within the existing network system
Right, okay.
to developments. Thanks, Chair.
Grant. Thanks, Gordon. Unless anybody has anything else. The final items, date, time and place of next meeting. That'll be Thursday the 3rd in room 30 at 10 o'clock. And following the meeting, a delegation from the committee will visit Full Circle Energy Park at Bombardier at 2:30. Oh yes, and then one final thing, just to provide lunch on our final day as well for members too. Okay? Agreed?
Great. I sip from menu.
And the committee office will be in contact with members about their visit to Bombardier. And good luck next week for those that are attending. Safe journey, and
Thank you.
hope it's productive. And the rest of us then will be down at Wyola Precision and Southday Coachworks.
You're going to Mule as well.
It was designed to put you out.